You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is True Pizza Delivery Horror Story from the Night Shift. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The first thing that felt wrong was the way the ticket printed. Not the sound, same dry mechanical chatter from the little Epson under the heat lamps, but the timing. It spat paper like it had been waiting, like it was impatient. I was reaching for a stack of wax paper to line a box when the receipt snapped out, curled at the edge, and slithered onto the stainless counter like a tongue. No one had touched the POS screen. The air in the shop was warm in that specific late-night way, oil-sweet, yeast-bready, a tired garlic fog that clung to your hoodie. The neon open sign in the front window hummed faintly, and every few seconds it made a tiny electronic click, as if it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. Outside, rain ticked at the glass in thin, lazy needles. The printed ticket read, "One large pepperoni extra crispy cash delivered to. Address notes. Don't knock. Text only." It wasn't the order that made my fingers hesitate. People asked for no knock all the time: babies, roommates, dogs, paranoid night shift nurses trying not to wake the house. It was the address line. It looked wrong, like it had been typed by someone who didn't know how addresses were supposed to sit on a line. The number and street were there, sure, but the city field was blank. The zip was half missing, the last 2 digits replaced by tiny squares like the printer had hiccuped. And in the corner, where it usually said online or phone, it just said, "No source." No phone number, no name, a normal glitch, explainable. Our system was old. The internet in this strip mall was a moody animal that bit at random. Still, I stared at the ticket long enough for the cheese smell to turn sharp in my nose. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new text from an unknown number. You got it. I didn't answer right away. I read it twice, then a third time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something less stupid. In my periphery, the pizza oven's conveyor belt whirred steadily. The same soft, rubbery hiss it always made, pushing someone's thin crust toward the mouth of the heat. A radio near the soda fridge muttered through late-night sports talk, the host laughing too hard at his own jokes. "Ben," someone called from the back, voice muffled through the swinging door. "You see that? Ticket just printed." I swallowed. My mouth was dry, and it felt silly to be dry over a pizza ticket. That's when the front door chimed, and a gust of wet air came in with a man I hadn't seen before, tall and thin, hood up, rainwater shining on his sleeves like fish scales. He didn't come all the way in, just hovered in the doorway, letting the bell keep its cheap little ringtone, and looked around like he was checking for a specific face. I said, because that's what you say when you're behind a counter at 1 a.m. and you don't want to escalate anything. "We're open." He didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the counter, to the printer ticket, and then to me. The bell finally settled into silence. He nodded once, small, almost polite, and stepped back out into the rain. The door shut behind him, and the neon open sign clicked again. I exhaled through my nose. A rational person would have called it coincidence. A guy walks in. A ticket prints. Tech glitches. Life goes on. But my phone buzzed again. Extra crispy. Don't knock. Text only. Same unknown number. That was the undeniable break. Not supernatural, not impossible, just too clean. I picked up the ticket and walked it toward the kitchen window. My name's Ben Harper. I was 24, male, and I'd been doing pizza delivery in South London. For so long it had started to feel like a second skin. Not the glamorous part of London. Either this was the strip of neighborhoods where everything was a little damp and a little tired, where kebab shops and nail salons sat side by side under flickering signs, and where the roads were a patchwork of old repairs that made your car rattle like it was full of loose change. I worked at Mondo Pizza, a corner shop wedged between a closed-down bedding place and a laundrette that never seemed to shut, even when the lights were off. The night shift paid a bit more, and I needed the bit more. Rent didn't care about my optimism. And this is the part I didn't say out loud to anyone. I liked the hours because fewer people watched you in them. Fewer eyes, less judgment, less chance of running into someone you knew, which mattered because my private flaw was that I was a coward about awkwardness. Not danger, necessarily. Awkwardness. The kind that makes your face go hot and your tongue stiff. The kind that turns you into a fumbling version of yourself. I'd rather deliver pizzas to strangers at 2 a.m. than run into an ex at 6 p.m. and have to pretend I was thriving. Ben, the voice came again. Stop daydreaming, man. Eddie pushed through the swinging door with a plastic tub of sliced peppers. He was short, broad-shouldered, male, and had the permanently flushed cheeks of someone who lived too close to a friar. He was older than me by a decade and acted like it, equal parts tired dad and chaotic older brother depending on the hour. Eddie Rosso, 35, male, appeared at the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. He leaned over the ticket, squinting. What's this? Where's the name? Where's the source? Did you type this? I didn't touch anything, I said, and my voice came out too defensive. I softened it. It just printed. Eddie made a sound like he didn't want to admit he cared. System's been acting up all week. I showed him my phone screen, the unknown number, the message. Eddie's eyebrows lifted, and for a second his face did something small and honest, concern slipping through the usual sarcasm. Maybe it's one of those app orders, he said. Sometimes it roots weird. It doesn't say app, I said. It says I tapped the ticket, right at the blank source line. Nothing. The kitchen window behind him fogged with steam as Marco pulled a pizza from the oven, the heat lamp turning the cheese into a glossy, bubbling topography. Marco Klein, 19. Male, was our youngest, skinny and quick. His forearms dusted with flour like he'd been handling chalk. He leaned in, chewing gum, eyes bouncing between Eddie and me like he wanted to be part of the story. What's going on? Marco asked. Did someone prank you? Do I look like I'm fun enough to prank? I said, and he grinned because that was the closest I got to joking most nights. Eddie picked up the ticket and held it near the light. Address is in our zone, he said slowly, reading. But the city's missing. That's weird. Also, I added, and hated that my voice dipped. Guy just walked in and looked at the ticket. Marco's grin faded, like he knew. I don't know, I said. He didn't say anything. Eddie stared at the door for a beat, like he expected the guy to come back in. Rain rattled harder on the glass now, and a car whooshed past outside, tires slicing water, leaving a thin wake of sound. Could be nothing, Eddie said, but he wasn't convincing himself. Could be some idiot trying to pay cash without giving info. My phone buzzed again, a third text. It's paid in cash. Bring it now. Marco leaned closer to see. That's creepy, he said quietly, like he didn't want the words to become real. Eddie lifted his chin at me. We don't have to take it. If the system's bugging, we cancel. End of story. That would have been the easy choice. Throw the ticket away. Laugh it off. Get back to folding boxes and thinking about rent and pretending I didn't care about being seen. But the address, wrong looking as it was, sat in a part of my brain that knew the streets. A real place, a real route. It wasn't a nonsense string of characters. And the unknown number, whoever it was, had my attention in a way I didn't like. I glanced at the CCTV monitor above the soda fridge. The camera outside the door showed nothing but wet pavement and the trembling reflection of our neon sign. No hooded figure, just rain and streetlight. Text only, Eddie muttered, reading the note again. Don't knock, cash. He looked at me, and in his eyes was the thing managers don't say out loud. We need the order. We need the money. We need the shift to go smooth. The margins on pizza were thin, and the margins on people's patience were thinner. Marco reached for the pizza box with the large pepperoni in it, already cut, already smelling good in that salty, comforting way that made you forget you were tired for half a second. He held it like it weighed more than it did. So what? Marco asked. We taking it or not? Eddie didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, ticket in one hand, and listened to the rain, to the neon hum, to the tiny click that kept happening like the sign had a nervous tick. I felt my phone in my palm, warm from my grip. And we all understood the choice sitting between us. Ignore the weirdness and move on, or treat the weirdness like it meant something, like it could be a problem, and change our night because of it. Eddie finally spoke, voice lower. If we do it, he said, we do it smart. He looked at me like I was already halfway out the door. Ben, he said, you want to take this run or not? Eddie's version of smart started with a marker and the back of a grease-stained flyer. Text the number first, he said. Make them confirm the address in a normal way. Ask for a name. If it's legit, they'll answer like a person. Marco hovered with the boxed pepperoni like he was holding something alive. I opened the unknown thread and typed, Hey, this is Mondo Pizza. Can you confirm your name plus full address? My thumb lingered over send, and I hated that my pulse had crept up over something this small. I hit send anyway. The message delivered. No iMessage bubble, no read, just that blunt little checkmark like a door shutting. Eddie leaned in toward my screen. Call it. It's 1 a.m., I said. So, he said, if they're awake enough to text, they're awake enough to answer. Call it on speaker. I called. It rang once, twice. Then it went to voicemail without the usual recorded greeting, just a dead air hiss for a beat, then a click. Like the line had been picked up and hung up fast. Marco made a soft noise, like a laugh he swallowed. Eddie's jaw worked. Okay, fine, cancel it. We don't take ghost orders. My phone buzzed while he said it. No calls. I said text only. Bring it. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Like I was already on the road. Like they'd been watching our little debate through the glass. I forced myself to look at the CCTV again, like proof would be waiting. Still just rain's slick pavement and the jittery neon reflection. No hooded man. No one lingering by the door. See, Marco said quickly. That's not normal. That's not a customer. Eddie pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. We've had weird customers, he muttered, but his voice wasn't committed. We've had people who don't want to talk. Not like that, Marco said. I felt the stupidest thought crawl into my mind. What if they're inside the shop? And I checked behind the soda fridge, the hallway toward the bathroom, even though there was nowhere to hide that didn't also smell like mop water. Nothing. My phone buzzed again. Leave it at the door. Don't knock. Cash under mat. Eddie snatched the ticket and studied the address again, lips moving as if sounding it out would make it behave. That's near Grove Park, he said. A couple miles. You can be there in 10 if the lights are kind. I didn't like how specific it suddenly was. Not somewhere in town, but a route I could picture. Left out of the lot, down the main road with the always broken pedestrian signal, past the petrol station that smelled like wet pennies, then the darker residential stretch where the streetlights had gaps. Why does the city field blank out like that? I asked, mostly to hear my own voice doing something logical. Eddie shrugged. POS does that when the address is pulled from saved data wrong. Like if someone autofills but deletes half, could be a busted app. Marco shook his head hard. Nah, the number knows you're standing here. It knew extra crispy. It knew, it's on the ticket, Eddie snapped, then immediately regretted the snap. He lowered his volume. Look, we can refuse it, that's fine. But if it's legit, it's money, and it's easy. My private fear being seen, being put in an awkward spot I couldn't smooth over came alive in a new shape. Because if this was a scam and I showed up like an idiot, I'd have to stand on someone's porch at 1 a.m. with a pizza box, texting a stranger who refused calls. If it was a prank, I'd be the punchline. And if it wasn't a prank, then I was about to walk into whatever it actually was. Eddie seemed to read my hesitation like a weather report. Listen, he said, softer. If you don't want it, I'll do it. I'm not making you. Marco cut in. Not going alone, he said, surprising both of us. He lifted his chin like he'd decided to be brave on purpose. We can both go. 2 people is safer. Eddie barked a humorless laugh. 2 people in 1 scooter, Marco gestured toward my car keys on the counter. He's got the Fiesta. I did. A dented Ford Fiesta that smelled faintly of stale fries, no matter how many air fresheners I sacrificed. Eddie looked between us, weighing. His practical side and his tired side argued silently. The tired side lost. Fine, Eddie said. Ben drives, Marco rides along. You keep the doors locked. You don't go into any building. You drop it, you take cash, you leave. If anything feels wrong, you're out. No hero stuff. Marco nodded too fast. Yeah, I didn't nod. I stared at my phone and typed back on the way. Confirm you'll leave cash under mat. What name is the order under? A response came almost immediately. Hannah. Just that. No last name. No emoji. No, thanks. It felt like someone throwing a pebble at a window, then stepping back into the dark. Eddie pointed a finger at my screen. Okay, Hannah, that's a name, human enough. Not really, Marco murmured. I slid the pizza into a delivery bag. The Velcro rasped loud in the warm kitchen. Eddie handed Marco a small torch from the junk drawer and a battered metal clipboard like we were going to do a survey. For the cash, Eddie said, if there's money, you put it in the bag and come straight back. Don't count it on the porch like a tourist. He hesitated, then grabbed my phone and tapped a few things. Share location with me and keep it on. Battery. 70, I said. Good. He handed it back and stared at us both with the expression of a man who'd rather be annoyed than worried. Text me when you're there. Text me when you leave. Marco and I stepped outside. The cold hit first, then the wet. The rain had turned from needles to a steady sheet, that made the car park shine like black glass. The strip mall lights blurred in the puddles. Somewhere down the road, a siren wailed far away, not urgent in our direction. The sound stretched thin by weather and distance. As I unlocked the Fiesta, the key fob clicked weakly, like it was tired too. We got in. The inside smelled like damp fabric and old takeaway bags. The windows fogged almost instantly from our breath. Marco buckled fast. "This is dumb," he said, half joking. "We should have just canceled." "Yep," I said, and started the engine. The radio came on to static because I'd left it that way. I turned it off. Silence in a car isn't silence. It's the soft rumble of the engine, the hiss of rain on the roof, the wipers complaining in a steady rhythm. We pulled out, tires slushing through shallow water. "Do you think that guy in the hood?" Marco started. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe he was just a guy." Marco stared out the side window. He looked at the ticket, though. "Lots of people look at counters," I said, and it sounded weak to my own ears. We drove past the laundrette, past the dark bedding shop, past the petrol station where a lone man stood under the awning, head down, lit blue by his phone screen. I caught myself scanning faces like I expected the hooded guy to appear in every reflection. At a red light, my phone buzzed again on the center console. "You took too long." My hands tightened on the wheel. Then, as the light turned green, another message landed. "Wrong car." I glanced at Marco. He'd seen it too. His mouth opened, then shut. The color drained from his cheeks in a way that made him look suddenly younger. "How?" he started. I didn't answer, because the answer was either obvious and bad or complicated and worse. The engine gave a small cough. The dashboard lights flickered once, like a blink. And then, as we turned onto the darker residential road, the one with missing streetlights, the Fiesta lurched, and the steering went heavy in my hands, like someone had grabbed the front wheels and decided to test my strength. "Ben," Marco said, sharp now. "What's happening?" I eased off the accelerator. The car shuddered. A warning icon flashed battery, then engine, then the whole dash went dim. The engine died. For a second, we rolled on momentum, rain pattering louder without the motor under it. Wipers slowed, smeared water across the windshield, then stopped mid-swipe like an arm frozen in the air. We coasted to the curb under a broken streetlight. The only illumination came from a distant amber lamp further down, making everything between us and it look like a tunnel. Marco's voice came out thin. "Your car just died." "I know," I said, already twisting the key again. Nothing, not even a click. My phone buzzed one more time, screen lighting up the dark interior. "Don't turn around." Marco's breathing went audible, quick little pulls. "Ben," he whispered, "why would it say that?" I stared at the windshield, at the rain sliding down like it had nowhere else to go, and felt a new kind of time pressure clamp onto the moment. Not the customer's 10 minutes, but the fact that we were now stopped, unlit, on a road with gaps in visibility, with a pizza order in our lap, and a stranger who seemed to know details they shouldn't. Behind us, somewhere in the rain, tires hissed on wet asphalt. A car slowing, close, and the choice that had felt optional in the shop suddenly didn't. The car behind us turned out to be a delivery van. It rolled past slow, headlights diffused into pale smears by the rain, tires whispering instead of roaring. The driver didn't look at us, just another late-night worker heading home, insulated in his own bubble. When the red tail lights shrank into the dark, Marco let out a breath he'd been holding long enough to make his shoulders shake. "Okay," he said. "Okay, not that." My hands were still locked around the wheel. I forced them to loosen one finger at a time. The interior smelled sharper now, like damp carpet and ozone from dying electronics. First attempt, the obvious one. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. No click, no cough, just the hollow sense of turning a dead thing. The dash stayed dark, the radio a blank rectangle. Outside, rain filled the silence. "Pop the hood," Marco said. "Maybe it's just the battery." I knew enough about cars to know that just the battery, at 1 a.m. on a half-lit road, wasn't comforting. But it was something to do. I grabbed the torch Eddie had given Marco and stepped out into the rain. It soaked my hair instantly, ran down the back of my neck. The road sloped gently downward toward the amber streetlight we'd seen earlier, then dipped into darkness again. Houses sat back from the curb on both sides, most of them blacked out, curtains drawn, the occasional blue glow of a TV flickering behind glass. I popped the hood. Steam didn't billow. Nothing dramatic happened at all. Just an engine bay slick with rain and grime, cables and metal gleaming dully under the weak beam of the torch. Marco leaned out the passenger door, hugging himself against the cold. "See anything?" "Not really," I said. "Battery looks there." I jiggled a cable. It didn't magically fix anything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it because the idea of looking at another message right then made my stomach clench. That felt like control, at least choosing not to look. We stood there longer than we should have, pretending mechanical insight would materialize if we stared hard enough. My fingers went numb. Rain dripped off the hood in a steady, irritating rhythm. "Ben," Marco said quietly, "we should call Eddie." I tried, I said, because I had. The call had gone straight to voicemail, probably him stepping into the walk-in freezer, or the building's spotty reception doing its thing. Still explainable. Still normal. Second attempt. Movement. We closed the hood and got back in, slamming the doors against the rain. I wiped my hands on my jeans, leaving dark streaks. "Maybe we can push it," Marco said. "Get it closer to the light, or at least out of the road." I nodded. Adrenaline makes bad ideas feel reasonable. We got out again, boots splashing. The Fiesta was angled slightly toward the curb already. We put our shoulders to the back and pushed. The car resisted like it had opinions. My shoes slipped on wet asphalt. Marco grunted, breath fogging. After a few shuddering feet, it rolled slow, heavy, but it rolled. We guided it until the front bumper kissed the curb under the broken streetlight. The amber glow now a little closer, a little kinder. We collapsed back into the seats, soaked and panting. "That's something," Marco said, trying to sound upbeat. His teeth chattered. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. "You're stopped." I typed back before I could talk myself revealing anything. "Car trouble. We're delayed." The response came fast enough to feel like an interruption. "Walk it." Marco stared at the screen. "No," he said, immediate and firm. "Absolutely not." "How far is it?" I asked, hating myself for asking. I pulled up the map. The blue dot pulsed where we sat, an island of light in a dark grid. The address, Hannah's address, was less than half a mile away, deeper into the residential pocket. A cluster of short streets, cul-de-sacs branching like fingers, narrow, quiet, 10 minutes on foot. Less if you hurried. "I'm not walking into that," Marco said, "with a pizza, with some stranger watching our dot move." I shared his instinct. Every part of me wanted to lock the doors and wait for daylight, or at least for Eddie to answer. But another part, the part that hated unfinished, awkward situations, kept tallying the facts. The car was dead, rain wasn't stopping, and sitting here made us visible in a different way. A stalled car under a broken streetlight was a beacon to anyone bored or curious enough to notice. My phone buzzed again. Leave it at the door. Money under mat. I said text only. Why does it care so much about how we deliver it? Marco asked. Why not just cancel? Because then it wouldn't be about the pizza anymore, I thought. It would be about us. Third attempt, delegation. I texted Eddie again. Car died near Grove Park. Engine won't start. We're safe but stuck. Can you call a tow or come get us? The message sent. No reply. Marco rubbed his arms. If we walk, we don't take the pizza, he said. Right, we leave it here. We go to the nearest house, knock like normal humans, ask for help. I pictured knocking on a stranger's door at 1 a.m., rain-soaked, explaining why I was there. The thought made my chest tighten. Awkwardness again, ridiculous, that it still mattered, even now. Before I could answer, a shape moved at the end of the street. My heart spiked. Marco sucked in a breath. A figure stepped into the edge of the amber light. Hood up, tall, thin. For one awful second, my brain stitched it together. The hooded man from the shop, the texts, the wrong car. It felt like confirmation. Then the figure raised an arm, and the light caught reflective strips on a jacket. A dog barked a sharp, excited sound, and a leash went taut. A jogger, or a dog walker. Middle-aged, male, head down against the rain. He glanced at us, frowned briefly in that way people do when they clock something unusual, but decide it's not their problem, and continued on, dog's paws slapping wet pavement. Marco laughed, breathless and shaky. Jesus, misdirection. Explained. My pulse took longer to come down, but the damage was done. My nerves felt sanded raw. We can't just sit here, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Battery's dead. Eddie's not answering. If we wait, we're just waiting. For what? Marco asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't like any of the options. I checked the map again. Half a mile. The route threaded past 3 intersections, then turned onto a cul-de-sac. Trees clustered thick there, their branches knitting overhead. The satellite view showed a narrow footpath connecting the cul-de-sac to the next street over an alley that cut between back gardens. A shortcut. My phone buzzed, as if responding to the thought. Use the path. Faster. Marco saw it. No, he said, louder this time. How does it know about the path? I stared at the screen. The rain tapped insistently on the roof, 1,000 tiny fingers. Somewhere, a fox screamed, the sound startling and human enough to raise goosebumps. We're not using any shortcut, I said, and felt a thin thread of resolve harden. If we walk the main road. Or we don't walk at all, Marco said, another vibration. Different this time. Eddie calling. I answered instantly. Eddie, where are you? He demanded, the background noise of the shop loud in his ear, oven hiss, radio chatter. Near Grove Park. Car died. Shit, he said. Okay, I can't leave right now, Marco, you there? I'm here, Marco said, leaning close. Listen, Eddie said. I called the number. My stomach dropped. You what? It didn't ring, he said. It connected, silent. Then someone breathed, not heavy, just there. I hung up. Marco swore under his breath. I'm sending a tow, Eddie went on, talking fast now. But it'll take time. If you feel unsafe, we already do, Marco said. Eddie exhaled. Then lock yourselves in and wait. Do not walk. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. You can't wait. A new message followed before I could react. I see the car. I twisted in my seat, scanning mirrors, the dark road behind us, the hedges lining the houses. Rain distorted everything. Shadows pooled where the streetlight failed. "I don't see anyone," Marco said, but his voice had gone small. Typed with stiff fingers, "Where are you?" The reply took longer this time, long enough for hope to flicker. Then, almost there, a sound came from outside, soft, close, footsteps in water, slow, measured. They stopped near the rear of the car. Marco's hand found my sleeve. "Ben," he whispered, "someone's behind us." I checked the mirrors. Rain-smeared glass showed nothing but our own pale faces. Another step, closer. The choice vanished. Waiting wasn't passive anymore, it was an invitation. I unlocked my door. "What are you doing?" Marco hissed. "We're not sitting here," I said. My voice shook despite me. "We go to the nearest house. Lights on or off, I don't care. We make noise. We get help." I grabbed the pizza bag, not because I thought we'd deliver it, but because it felt wrong to leave it, like leaving a piece of ourselves behind. As I opened the door, the footsteps paused. The rain seemed to hold its breath. And once we stepped out, once the door shut behind us, there was no retreat, no car to shelter in, no pretending this was still just a broken down delivery. We were committed to being seen. We moved like we'd agreed on a plan, even though we hadn't. Me went first, because I'd opened the door, and that apparently meant I was the one deciding things now. Marco stayed half a step behind, torch in his hand, the beam jittering across wet pavement and hedges. The pizza bag bumped my leg with each step, absurd and heavy. The nearest house was maybe 30 yards up the street on the right, a narrow semi with a low brick wall and a hedge that had grown shaggy, spilling into the sidewalk. No lights, no porch lamp, just a black rectangle of windows. "Maybe pick one with lights on," Marco hissed. "There aren't any," I whispered back. Footsteps behind us, not rushing, not calling out, just the soft splash of someone taking their time. I kept walking, faster but not running. Running would announce panic, and panic was its own kind of invitation. We reached the gate. It squealed when I pushed it open, high and metallic, loud in the rain. I almost wanted it loud. I wanted neighbors to hear, dogs to bark, curtains to twitch. I rapped on the door with my knuckles, hard, no sound inside, no movement. "Try another," Marco said, voice cracking. Another step behind us. I turned, torchlight spilling over the street. Rain turned everything into a smear of gray. At first I saw nothing. Then, in the strip of amber light from the distant lamp, I caught the outline of a hooded figure standing near the back of my car. Still, patient. "Oi," I called, voice louder than I meant. "Can we help you?" The figure didn't answer. Marco's hand clamped my arm. "Ben, please." My phone buzzed in my pocket, vibrating against my thigh like a trapped insect. I didn't look, but I knew it would be the same thread, the same flat commands. I tried the doorbell. It was one of those cheap plastic ones, probably dead. I knocked again, and this time I heard something inside, movement, slow, like someone shifting in bed, deciding whether the world was worth waking up for. A light flicked on behind the frosted glass, warm yellow. Relief hit me so hard my knees loosened. The door opened a crack. A chain held it. A man's face appeared, puffy with sleep and suspicion, gray stubble on his jaw. He blinked rain out of his eyelashes and stared at us like we'd crawled out of a ditch. Gareth Mills, 52, male, stood behind the chained door, wearing a faded t-shirt and plaid pajama bottoms. His eyes went from my soaked hoodie to Marco's torch to the pizza bag, and his expression tightened instead of softening. "What the hell?" he said, voice low. "It's 1 a.m. "My car broke down," I said quickly. "Sorry, really. We're from the pizza place down on the main road. We need help." I swallowed, hating the word. "Someone's out there." Gareth's gaze flicked past us down the street. He didn't open the chain. Smart. "I don't see anyone," he said. "He's by our car," Marco blurted. "We got texts. He knows where we are." Gareth's mouth tightened further, the way adults do when teenagers say something that sounds dramatic. "Texts from who?" I dug my phone out and held it up, screen bright in the rain. The unknown number, the messages, wrong car. Use the path. I see the car. Gareth leaned closer without opening the door further. His eyes narrowed at the screen, not at the words at the number. "That's local," he murmured. "What?" I said. He didn't answer. He looked down the street again, longer this time. Then he unhooked the chain. "Get in," he said. We didn't hesitate. Marco practically tripped over the threshold. I followed, dragging the pizza bag like a stupid talisman. Gareth slammed the door and turned the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying clunk. Inside smelled like radiator heat and old coffee. A hallway cluttered with shoes, an umbrella stand, a framed photo on the wall of a man holding a golden retriever. The TV in the living room was on mute, flickering blue. Gareth grabbed a set of keys from a hook and shoved them into his pocket. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the front window. He peeked through a gap in the curtains. Marco's voice shook. "Don't go out there. Not leaving you in my house with some unknown situation outside and doing nothing," Gareth said. He said it like a man who'd been responsible for things for too long. He glanced at the pizza bag in my hand and made a face. "Put that down." I set it on the floor, the smell of pepperoni briefly blooming in the warm air, ridiculous and normal. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Nice house. The words punched all the air out of my chest. "He knows we're inside," I whispered. Marco's eyes widened. "Out there's," Gareth held up a hand for silence, his gaze still fixed on the street. "Shut up," he mouthed, not unkindly, just urgent. He angled his body so he could see the same strip of road through the curtain gap. At first, nothing. Then the hooded figure stepped into view, closer than before, moving with that same unhurried confidence. He stopped beside my Fiesta's driver's side door and leaned down, like he was inspecting the lock. Marco made a sound in his throat. Gareth muttered, "Christ." The figure straightened and calmly lifted something. My pizza delivery bag. The one I'd left in the car when I ran to Gareth's door. No, I'd brought it. It was inside. So what was he lifting? A second bag, Eddie's spare thermal bag that I kept in the back seat, empty, crumpled. He held it up, looked at it like it meant something, then tossed it onto the road. Then he walked to the passenger side, to where Marco had been sitting. He tried the handle. Once. Twice. It didn't open, but the attempt was casual, like testing a door in your own house. Gareth's jaw clenched. He pulled his phone out. "Police," he whispered, and started dialing. My phone buzzed again. No police, text only. Gareth froze with his thumb over the call button, staring at my screen in my hand as if it had become a live wire. He didn't hit call. He didn't hang up. He just stood there, caught between choices. "Call them," I said, voice thin. "Please." Gareth swallowed and pressed call. Outside, the hooded figure turned his head sharp, sudden toward Gareth's house, toward our window. I felt the irrational certainty of being seen through brick and rain. The The figure lifted his own phone to his ear, and then Gareth's phone went dead in his hand. Not the call failing dead, screen black. What the Gareth shook it, pressed the side button. Nothing. He looked at us, disbelief flashing into anger. It was charged. Marco grabbed his own phone from his pocket. Mine's, he pressed the screen. Black. He looked at me, terrified. My battery was full. I checked mine, still on, still vibrating with another incoming message. Your phones are off now. Gareth's breathing got heavier. How is he doing that? I didn't have a clever answer. I had a throat that wanted to close. Outside, the hooded figure walked away from the car and toward the houses, head down, moving along the sidewalk with purpose now. Not slow anymore. Not patient. Decided. Toward Gareth's gate. Gareth backed away from the window. Kitchen, he said, voice suddenly very controlled. Back of the house. Now we moved. Gareth grabbed something from a drawer as we passed, an old heavy torch, the kind with metal ridges, more club than flashlight. He shoved it into my hands. Do you have a back door? I asked. Yeah, he snapped. But it opens to the garden, fences, wet, hard to climb. Marco looked like he might cry. We can't stay here. We reached the kitchen. A small room, linoleum floor, sink full of dishes. A back door with a frosted window. Rain streaked down it too. The garden beyond was a dark blur. Gareth yanked open a cabinet and pulled out a small red tin, first aid kit. He shoved it onto the counter like it might be needed in minutes rather than hours. Then the front doorbell rang. Not our broken one. Gareth S. Loud, clean, insistent. Marco flinched so hard he hit his hip on the counter. The bell rang again. Longer. Gareth, a voice called from outside. Male. Close. Calm. It wasn't muffled much by the door. It carried like someone standing right there, hand on the frame. Gareth went pale. How does he know my name? My stomach twisted. The photo in the hallway, Gareth with the dog, the frame on the wall. Easy to read if someone had looked through the window earlier. Or the name on a letterbox. Or the voice came again, almost friendly. Gareth, open up. I just want my pizza. A laugh bubbled out of Marco, one sharp, panicked sound. What the Gareth lifted a finger to his lips, eyes wide, telling us to shut up again. He grabbed a chair and dragged it to the back door with a scraping screech that sounded too loud in the small room. He climbed onto it and shoved at the tiny top window latch. Can you get out? I whispered. Maybe, Gareth whispered back, straining. The latch resisted. He swore under his breath. The front bell rang a third time. Then the voice changed, still controlled, but colder. Gareth, don't make me knock. I'm sorry, Gareth whispered, not to us, to himself. He got the latch open. Cold air knifed in. Rain spattered the sill. He pushed the small window outward. It's not big enough, Marco hissed. It's big enough for you, Gareth snapped, and Marco stared at him like he'd been slapped. The voice from the front door, last chance. Something thudded against the front of the house. Not a kick. A heavy, deliberate hit, like a shoulder checking the door to see what it would take. Gareth looked at me. You, he said. Help him. I climbed onto the chair, grabbed Marco under the arms, and hauled him up. He wriggled, breath ragged, trying to fold himself through the small opening. His jacket snagged. He cursed, quiet and desperate. Go, Gareth hissed. Another thud from the front. The doorframe groaned. Marco got his shoulders through, then his torso, then his hips with a wet scramble. He dropped out of sight into the garden with a muffled grunt. My turn. I shoved my upper body through. The sill bit into my ribs. Rain soaked my shirt instantly. I twisted, felt something tear, fabric, maybe skin. and then I was half out, legs still inside, kicking for purchase. A crash from the front of the house, wood splintering, a sound so final it made Marco scream outside. Gareth grabbed my ankles. "Move," he barked and shoved. Hard. My legs slid, my knee slammed into the frame, pain white and immediate. I bit down on a shout. Then I was out, dropping into the garden on muddy ground, hands catching my fall, palms stinging. Rolled and looked up. Gareth was still inside, still on the chair. He reached for the latch, trying to pull the window closed behind us. And then, from inside the house, a new sound, footsteps in the hallway, fast, wet, coming toward the kitchen. Gareth's eyes met mine through the rain-streaked frosted glass. He looked older in that second, tired, furious at himself, furious at the world. He shoved at the window one last time, but it didn't catch. The latch slipped. The kitchen door banged open. Gareth turned. The figure stepped in, hood still up, rain dripping from the edge like a slow leak. I couldn't see his face clearly through the frosted pane, but I saw the shape of his arm lift. Gareth lunged. There was a sharp crack, metal on something hard. Gareth's heavy torch, I realized a fraction too late. He de-swung first. The figure stumbled back. Then Gareth made a sound, short, involuntary, and folded at the waist. A knife, small, quick, not cinematic, just a glint and a sudden collapse of breath. Gareth hit the floor out of view. Marco grabbed my sleeve in the garden, yanking me backward. "Ben, move." We ran along the slick grass, shoes sinking, fence boards looming ahead. Gareth had been right. The fences were tall, wet, hard to climb. Ivy and moss made them slippery. My knee screamed with every step, the impact from the window still blooming into real pain. Behind us, inside the house, something smashed, glass maybe. A back door handle rattled. We reached the fence. I jumped, grabbed the top, and my hand slipped. Mud, rain, panic. Marco tried beside me and slid down with a helpless sob. The back door of Gareth's house burst open. We froze, caught in the garden like rats in a sink. The hooded figure stepped out into the rain, scanning. He wasn't huge, not a movie monster, just a man in a dark jacket, holding something close to his body. His movements were efficient now, not theatrical. He looked at the fence, then at us, and his head tilted slightly, as if considering the work involved. I did the only thing I could think of, improvised, desperate. I grabbed the pizza bag from where I dropped it earlier by the kitchen window. Somehow it had landed outside when we shoved through, splattered with mud. I yanked it open, pulled out the hot box. The smell hit the rain like a flare. "Hey," I shouted, voice cracking. "You want it? Take it." The figure's attention snapped to me. I hurled the pizza box, not at his face, but to the side, over the fence line where the garden met the alley. It slapped against wood and landed with a soggy cardboard thump, sliding out of sight. For 1 second, the man's gaze followed it on instinct. That second was everything. "Now," I yelled, and threw myself at the fence again. This time, I dug my fingers into a rough knot in the wood, found a purchase, hauled. Pain ripped through my knee, but adrenaline bulleted aside. I got one leg over, then the other, and dropped into the alley on the far side, landing hard and nearly collapsing. Marco scrambled after me, panting, slipping, but he made it by inches, falling into the alley beside me with a wet smack. We ran. The alley was narrow, lined with wheelie bins, slick bricks underfoot. The rain sounded different between fences, more enclosed, louder, like someone pouring water into a metal trough. We burst out onto the next street, stumbling onto a wider road with actual streetlights and a bus stop shelter. A car passed, headlights, real people inside. I waved both arms like an idiot, like I wanted to be seen more than I'd ever wanted anything. The car slowed. A woman rolled down her window a crack. "Are you okay?" she called. I heard myself say, "Call the police," in a voice that didn't sound like mine. Behind us, at the mouth of the alley, the hooded figure appeared just for a moment, standing under the weak light, rain slicking his shoulders. He didn't chase. He didn't need to. He just looked at us like he was memorizing. Then he stepped back into the dark. The woman's eyes widened. She fumbled for her phone. "I'm calling," she said, voice trembling. Marco sank onto the curb, shaking so hard his whole body rattled. I tried to stand still, but my knee buckled and I had to grab the bus stop pole, metal cold and steady under my fingers. Somewhere behind us, in Gareth's house, a TV still flickered on mute. And Gareth, who'd opened his door, who tried to do the right thing, was alone on a kitchen floor because we had brought the wrong kind of attention to the wrong street. The conflict was over in the only way it could be over. Not clean, not fair, just finished enough to leave us breathing. But I knew, with the same sick certainty as the earlier texts, that whatever had happened tonight would not stay neatly inside tonight. Not in my head, not in Marco's, not in the quiet, wet grid of those streets. The police arrived in pieces, not all at once. First, a patrol car, lights washing the wet street blue and white. Then an ambulance that pulled up crooked back doors, swinging open, while rain pattered uselessly on its roof. Then another car, and another, radios hissing with half-finished sentences. Night filled with purposeful noise, and in doing so, took something away from the fear. Not erased it, just pushed it back enough to breathe. Marco sat on the curb under the bus stop shelter, wrapped in a foil blanket someone had pressed around his shoulders. He hadn't stopped shaking. Not the dramatic kind, just a constant, fine tremor, like a phone buzzing on silent. A paramedic knelt in front of him, asking the same questions twice, gently, because Marco kept drifting. Name, Marco. Age, 19. Do you know where you are? Marco nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. I was on the edge of the scene, leaning against a signpost, my knee wrapped tight and throbbing in a way that felt deep and structural. Every time I shifted my weight, white sparks bloomed behind my eyes. A paramedic had told me it probably wasn't broken, probably, and that word echoed louder than it should have. Someone had given me a cup of tea. I hadn't asked for it. I kept forgetting to drink it, then remembering and burning my tongue. "Ben," a voice said. I looked up. Eddie stood there, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket half-zipped like he'd thrown it on while running. His eyes were wide, unfocused, scanning me for damage like he was doing inventory. "Jesus," he breathed. "Jesus Christ." He didn't hug me. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders, firm, grounding, like he was making sure I was still solid. "You okay?" Nodded because that was easier than answering honestly. "They took him out," Eddie said quietly. "The guy from the house. Gareth," I swallowed. "Is he alive?" Eddie said quick. "He's alive, lost a lot of blood. Knife nicked something important, but they got pressure on it fast. He's in surgery now." The relief was physical, a sag through my chest that almost took my legs with it. Alive wasn't safe. Alive wasn't fine. But alive was something. A police officer approached then, notebook already damp from rain. She introduced herself, name slipping past me, and started asking questions that felt both too simple and impossibly large. When did you first receive the messages? Did you recognize the number? Can you describe the suspect? I did my best. Hood, dark jacket. Average height, male. My descriptions felt flimsy even as I said them, like I was trying to describe a dream that didn't want to stay still. Marco was questioned separately. I could hear his voice rising, then cracking, then flattening into something almost mechanical. He told the story the way you might read instructions. First this happened, then this, then this. No adjectives, no emotion. Like if he kept it factual, it wouldn't be able to hurt him again. An officer asked to see my phone. I hesitated, just a second too long. Please, she said, not unkindly. I handed it over. She scrolled through the thread, rainwater beating on the screen, her expression tightening line by line. Did you respond to all of these? She asked. Yes, I said. I mean most of them. Did the suspect ever identify himself? No. Did he threaten you directly? I thought of don't turn around. Of your phones are off now. Of Gareth's name spoken from behind a door. Yes, I said finally. But not directly. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. The Fiesta was towed an hour later, dragged onto the flatbed like a wounded animal. The driver clicked his tongue sympathetically and said something about alternators and bad luck. He didn't know he was talking about more than the car. By the time the street started to empty, the rain had eased into a thin mist that made everything glow. Police tape fluttered uselessly around Gareth's gate. His front door hung crooked on its hinges, splintered wood raw and pale where it had given way. I couldn't stop looking at it. Ben, Eddie said, following my gaze. Don't. My voice caught stupidly. He opened the door. Eddie didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Marco was taken home by his sister. She arrived in a fury at the world, at me, at Eddie, at the rain, and bundled him into her car like he might disappear if she let go. He didn't look back when they drove off. I went to the hospital for my knee because the pain had stopped being negotiable. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a familiar purgatory. I sat there in wet clothes, shivering, filling out forms with a pen that barely worked. A nurse asked me what happened. My car broke down, I said, and then, because it felt wrong to lie even a little, I added, and then some other stuff. She smiled faintly. That's usually how it goes. They wrapped my knee properly, told me to rest, to ice it, to come back if it swelled or changed color. They used words like strain and soft tissue damage. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that matched how it felt to put weight on it. Before I left, I asked quietly how the man from the house was doing. The nurse checked a screen. Still in surgery, she said, but stable. I thanked her for answering, even though she hadn't needed thanks. It was nearly dawn when Eddie drove me home. The city looked different in that gray hour, scrubbed and ordinary. Delivery vans replaced police cars. People in gym clothes jogged past without looking at us. Somewhere, someone was opening a cafe. You can take time off, Eddie said as we pulled up outside my building. Paid, don't argue. I didn't have the energy to argue. At my door, he hesitated. You did what you could, he said. You know that, right? I nodded, but the thought lodged somewhere uncomfortable. What you could didn't feel like enough. It never does. Inside my flat, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Shoes by the door. Sink half full of dishes. The quiet hum of the fridge. It felt like walking into a photograph of my own life. I showered. The water stung my scraped hands. Purple bruises were already blooming along my ribs and knee abstract maps I didn't remember drawing. When I turned the water off, the silence pressed in again. I sat on my bed and finally, deliberately, opened the message thread one more time. No new messages, no typing bubbles, just the same short commands, frozen in time. I blocked the number, then I deleted it. Then I checked the trash and deleted it again. Sleep came in pieces. I dreamed of doorbells and phones vibrating against my leg. I woke to daylight and the sound of someone downstairs dragging bins to the curb. Later that day, afternoon, according to my phone, Eddie texted, "Marco's okay. Shaken, but home. Hospital says Gareth made it through surgery." I exhaled and typed back, "Thank you." The police called the next day. They decanvassed the area, found a neighbor's camera that caught a hooded figure walking through the street hours earlier. No clear face, no plates. They said the phone interference was unusual, but not impossible. Signal jammers existed, small ones, cheap ones. The number was prepaid, purchased locally. No name attached. "We're treating it as an aggravated assault and stalking," the officer said. "We'll be in touch." They were twice more, each time the same careful phrases. No suspect identified. No arrest. Week later, I drove past Gareth Street on purpose. The door was fixed. New wood, unpainted, standing out like a fresh scar. A small bouquet of flowers sat on the step, wilted but still trying. I didn't stop. I didn't know what I would say if I did. I quit night shifts. That part was easy. Eddie understood without comment. Marco didn't come back at all. I heard he'd enrolled in a course, something far from kitchens and late hours. I couldn't blame him. Life filled in around the edges again. Rent, groceries, the dull comfort of routine. The city smoothed itself over as cities do. But sometimes, when my phone buzzes unexpectedly, my body reacts before my mind does. A jolt, a tightening, a brief, irrational certainty that someone is paying attention again. And once, only once, I could swear my phone vibrated late at night, long after I'd blocked and deleted everything. When I checked it, there was nothing there. Just my reflection in the dark screen, looking older than I remembered. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming. Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories. And tonight's story, the ice cream man in our town didn't sell ice cream, is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. The first thing that went wrong was the dryer. Not wrong, nothing dramatic, no sparks, no smoke. Just the tiniest hitch in the rhythm. The steady thump, thump, thump of wet towels tumbling, and then a brief pause like it had swallowed a sock and needed to think about it. Then it started again. I stood in the laundry room with one hand on the metal door frame, listening like the machine had something to confess. The air was warm and lint sweet, that baked cotton smell that usually meant everything in my life was doing what it was supposed to. Above the washer, a single bare bulb buzzed faintly. I'd always meant to swap it for an LED and never did. "Don't stare at it like it's going to answer," Jonah said from the doorway. His voice was casual, but I caught the tiny strain in it, like he'd been rehearsing normal. He had his phone in his hand, screen bright against the dim hallway, thumb hovering over nothing. Behind him, the kitchen radio was playing some local station too low to make out. A voice, and then music, and then a different voice. "I'm not staring," I said. "I'm listening." Jonah stepped closer, leaned in as if he could hear something I couldn't. He smelled like cold air and cedar soap. He'd been outside earlier, hauling boxes from his trunk in that determined way he had whenever he was trying not to seem stressed. "Sounds fine," he said, but his eyes flicked to the floor drain in the corner. A round metal grate with rust around the edge. The kind you don't notice until you do. It did a pause, I told him. The dryer paused, he repeated, like he was translating my sentence into something harmless. "Okay, it's a dryer." I wanted to let it go. I really did. But I'd been on edge all day, and I didn't like the way my brain kept counting little irregularities and stacking them up like evidence. My mother used to call it catastrophizing. She'd say it the way you say bad habit to a kid picking scabs. Jonah called it your crime documentary thing, like it was cute. It wasn't cute when I couldn't stop. "I'll switch the load," I said. I opened the dryer. Heat rushed out and fogged my glasses for a second. Towels, jeans, the beige bath mat we'd bought because it was neutral. I lifted the bath mat, and there it was. A thin strip of paper, folded once, stuck to the damp rubber backing like it had been pressed there on purpose. It wasn't a receipt, not the usual junk you find in pockets. It looked like someone had torn it from a notebook. The edges were ragged. Lines were faint blue. The fold had been creased hard. Jonah saw it in my hand and made a noise that might have been a laugh if it didn't die in his throat. "Okay, that's weird," he said. I held it up under the buzzing bulb. The paper was smeared like it had gotten wet and dried. The writing, blocky, heavy, was still legible. "Can you hear me down here?" The question mark was a deep puncture through the page. For a half second, I just stared at it, waiting for my brain to file it under a normal explanation. Kid's prank. Old notes stuck in something secondhand. Jonah messing with me. But Jonah didn't do this kind of thing. He could barely keep a surprise birthday dinner secret without his face giving it away. He took the note from me, turned it over like there might be an answer on the back. There was. Only the faint impression of whatever had been written on the next page in the notebook. "That's," he swallowed. "That's not from us. Check your pockets," I said immediately, too sharp. My voice came out the way it does when I'm trying to control a situation by being in charge of it. Jonah patted his jeans. "I'm not the one who writes notes and hides them in appliances." "I don't write notes like that," I said. Then, softer, "Do you?" He looked offended, and then the offense shifted into something else, concern maybe, or the beginning of it. He handed the note back like it had weight. "I didn't," he said. "But this isn't funny." I nodded, because my chest had started doing that tight thing it does when I want to sprint and can't see where to run. The house was older than either of us liked to admit. A split level outside of Pittsburgh, built in the 70s, with paneling in the lower den and a basement that smelled permanently of concrete and old paint. We'd bought it 3 weeks ago because the school district was good and the price was reasonable, and the inspection report didn't scream catastrophe, just normal things. Moisture readings on the low side, a few hairline cracks, the recommendation to regrade the yard by spring. Jonah had been excited in a way that scared me. He walked through rooms talking about what we could do, like the house was already behaving, like it had no history, like walls didn't hold things. I was the one who had insisted we replace the locks the first day. I was also the one who still checked the closets before bed. My name is Mara Collins. I'm 29. I'm the kind of person who double checks that the stove is off and then takes a photo of it, just to be sure. I tell people it's because I'm visual. The truth is, I don't trust the feeling of certainty. It slips too easily. Jonah shifted his weight, eyes on the stairwell that led down to the den, and then another half flight to the basement door. From where we stood, you couldn't see the door itself. Only the angle of the wall and the start of the steps, the paint slightly different where someone had touched it up. Could it be from the old owners? He asked. They moved out, I said. We cleaned everything. We've done laundry here twice already. He exhaled through his nose. Maybe it was in a pocket, and then it gets stuck to the bath mat, I finished, and asks if we can hear it down here. The radio in the kitchen changed to a commercial. The dryer resumed its steady rhythm like it wanted to help. Jonah lifted his phone, as if the light on the screen might make the note less real. We should call Ashley, he said. She'll tell us what to do. Ashley was his sister, which meant she had two settings, calm practical and calm sarcastic. Either would have been better than the way my brain was starting to narrate. Before Jonah could move, the back door opened, and a burst of cold air spilled into the hallway. Hello, a voice called, loud and bright. Jonah's shoulders loosened like a string cut. Over here, he called back. A second later, Ashley appeared at the end of the hall with her scarf half unwound, cheeks flushed from the cold. She had a paper bag in one hand and a six-pack in the other. She kicked snow off her boots with no shame. Ashley Greer, 32, female, was the kind of person who always showed up as if she'd been invited twice. Housewarming rescue squad, she announced, lifting the six-pack. I brought beer and those spicy pretzels you pretend you don't like. You're a saint, Jonah said, genuinely relieved. Ashley's eyes took in the laundry room in one sweep, me, the open dryer, the note in my hand, Jonah's phone like a talisman. Okay, she said slowly. This feels like I walked into a marital fight about fabric softener. It's not that, Jonah said. I held up the note. Ashley leaned in, her smell of peppermint gum and winter air cutting through the warm laundry scent. She read the words, and her eyebrows climbed. Okay, she said again, but this time it wasn't playful. She reached for the paper, then stopped, like touching it might be a bad decision. Where did you find that? In the dryer, I said. On the bath mat. Ashley's gaze flicked to the stairwell without meaning to. She pulled a face, as if she'd tasted something metallic. That's a prank, she said, but it landed like a question. Jonah tried to laugh. From who? Ashley set the beer down on the washer with a thunk, and finally took the note between two fingers, holding it away from her body. She turned it over like Jonah had. Nothing. Do you have a basement, kid? She asked, too lightly. Stop, Jonah said automatically. Ashley held the note up under the bulb. Buzzing seemed louder now, or maybe we were all listening harder. Mara, Ashley said, glancing at me. This is going to sound like I'm mocking you, but I'm not. Did you write this? Like stress thing? My face heated. Not anger exactly. Something more embarrassing. No, I said, I didn't. Ashley nodded slowly. She believed me. Or at least, she believed the situation was weird enough that it didn't matter whether she did. Jonah cleared his throat. We're trying to figure out how it got there. Ashley's mouth tightened at the corners. Okay, so, options. 1, it fell out of someone's pocket. 2, The old owners left it somewhere dumb and it migrated. 3, she paused, eyes drifting again to the stairwell. 3, someone's messing with you. The radio cut back to music. A bass line, then vocals. Life continuing. Someone like who? Jonah asked, and I heard the crack in his comm. Ashley shrugged with forced nonchalance. I don't know. Neighborhood kids. Someone who had keys before you changed the locks. Contractor, the ghost of Home Depot. I couldn't help it. I barked a laugh, short and ugly. Then I stopped because the laugh felt wrong in my mouth. I folded the note once, exactly on the crease, and held it in my palm. It was still slightly damp, like it had sweated. Jonah rubbed his face. We should go downstairs, he said finally. The sentence dropped into the room and just sat there. I looked at the stairwell. The way the light from the hallway fell down 2 steps and then stopped. The house's lower level always felt like a different place. Cooler, the air heavier. The smell faintly sour like old carpet and paint cans. My flaw, if you want to call it that, is that I don't like unknown spaces. I don't like being unable to see the corners. It's not fear of monsters. It's fear of people. People who can fit into places you don't check. Jonah's fear was the opposite, that he'd overreact and look stupid, that he'd call the police and they'd shrug and leave, and he'd be the guy in the neighborhood who panicked over a scrap of paper. Ashley looked between us. The practical side of her was awake now, fully. If you go down there, she said, you don't go alone. Jonah nodded like he'd already decided. Flashlight, he said, looking around. There's one in the junk drawer, Ashley said automatically. I could have said no. I could have told them we'd throw the note away, lock the basement door, and go upstairs to open the beer, and pretend the dryer pause was just a dryer pause. Instead, I heard myself say, we just look. We don't make it a thing. Ashley's eyes softened, and for a second she looked older. Sure, she said, we just look. Jonah reached past me to shut the dryer door with a firm click, like sealing a truth inside a machine. The dryer resumed its steady rhythm. The bulb buzzed. We stood at the top of the stairs, 3 bodies in a narrow hall, and listened to the normal sounds of a house trying to be a house. Then Jonah took the first step down, and we followed toward the basement door, toward the choice we'd already made without admitting it. The basement door stuck the way doors do when they've been painted too many times. Jonah put his shoulder into it gently at first, then harder, the wood making a dry, complaining sound before it finally opened with a soft thok. The smell came up immediately, cool concrete, old cardboard, something faintly sweet and rotten like apples forgotten in a drawer. Ashley clicked on the flashlight from the junk drawer. The beam cut a narrow cone through the dim, catching dust motes that drifted like they had nowhere urgent to be. Okay, she said, everyone breathe. This is just a basement. It wasn't, though. Not really. The stairs were steep, carpeted in that low-pile industrial gray that never quite dries. The handrail wobbled if you touched it. I noticed all of it because my brain was busy mapping exits. Up the stairs, out the door. If something happened, how fast could we move? Jonah went first again, because of course he did. He hated the idea of me slipping. Ashley stayed behind me, her free hand brushing the wall for balance. Halfway down, Jonah stopped. What? I asked. He angled the flashlight toward the bottom step. The carpet there was darker, like it had been wet recently. Not soaked, just damp. Ashley leaned in. Could be condensation, she said. Basements do that. Or a leak, Jonah said. I thought of the inspection report, the moisture readings, the line that said within acceptable range. Acceptable didn't mean safe. It meant not someone else's problem yet. At the bottom, the basement opened into a long rectangular space with exposed beams overhead and a low ceiling that made Jonah duck automatically. The walls were painted a tired off-white, chipped in places. Shelving units lined one side, stacked with paint cans, old tools, boxes labeled in a stranger's handwriting. The other side was mostly empty, except for the furnace and the water heater tucked into the far corner behind a half wall. The flashlight beam swept across the floor. "Jesus," Ashley said softly. The concrete was marked with footprints, not muddy boot prints like you'd expect from someone tracking in dirt. Bare footprints, slightly darker than the surrounding concrete, as if someone had walked across it with wet feet. They went from the far corner near the furnace toward the stairs. They stopped about 3 feet short of the bottom step. My stomach did a slow, careful drop. Jonah crouched without thinking, his knee hitting the concrete with a dull knock. They're fresh," he said. "How can you tell?" I asked, though I already knew. "They haven't dried all the way," he said. He didn't touch them. Just hovered, like he was afraid of smudging something important. "See the edges, still sharp." Ashley swallowed. "Okay," she said again. "Okay, this is now a thing." I felt my chest tighten, that familiar vice. Unknown spaces. People-shaped possibilities. "Call the police," I said immediately. Jonah hesitated. It was only a second, but it was enough. "And say what?" he asked. "We found footprints. In our basement," I snapped. "Bare footprints, with a note." Ashley looked between us. "We can call the non-emergency line," she said. "They'll tell us what to do." Jonah rubbed his face hard. "I don't want to overreact." That was it. That was his fear, standing there in the open, looking ridiculous, being the guy who cried intruder and got a lecture about humidity. "Jonah," I said, keeping my voice low and tight. "Someone was down here." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He followed the footprints with the flashlight again, slower this time, like he was reading a sentence he didn't want to finish. "They came from the furnace area," he said. "Why would someone be barefoot near the furnace?" Ashley shifted her weight. The floor creaked under her boot. "Unless they live down here," she said, then immediately shook her head. No, that's stupid." "Forget I said that." The furnace clicked on with a sudden whoop, air rushing through the ducts overhead. I flinched despite myself. "Okay," Ashley said briskly. "New rule. No one splits up. Jonah, call the non-emergency line. Mara, take photos. Document everything." Jonah pulled out his phone. "No bars." He frowned, turned it, tried again. "That's weird." My phone buzzed in my hand as if on cue, 1 bar, then none. The basement ate signal. "Of course it did. Great," Ashley muttered. "Basement's a dead zone." "We should go back up," I said. "Call from the kitchen." Jonah nodded, then paused. His flashlight beam had stopped moving. "What?" I asked. "There's water," he said. He stood and walked toward the furnace, slow and deliberate. The footprints led there, but he didn't follow them exactly. He stepped wide, like he didn't want to overlap. Behind the half wall, the floor was visibly wet. A thin sheen of water spread across the concrete, reflecting the flashlight in a dull shimmer. It wasn't gushing. It was worse, quiet. "Is that?" Ashley started. "Water heater," Jonah said. "Or a pipe." The water heater was old beige, with a dent on the side. A thin stream of water trickled from a valve near the bottom, running along the floor toward a drain set into the concrete near the wall. The drain I'd noticed upstairs. the rusted grate. My brain snapped into logistics mode because fear loves something to organize. "How long has it been leaking?" I asked. Jonah crouched again, touched the side of the heater, yanked his hand back. "It's warm," he said. "Active leak." Ashley groaned. "If that floods, you're looking at electrical issues. Mold, structural stuff." "And someone was walking through it," I said. The footprints made sense now. Wet feet, bare feet. My heart started to pound harder. "Jonah," I said, "what if they're still here?" The question hung between us, heavy and very real. "No," he said automatically. We would have heard. A sound came from the far end of the basement. Not a voice, not a footstep. A soft scrape, like cardboard shifting against cardboard. Ashley's flashlight jerked toward the shelves. "Hello," Jonah called, his voice cracking just enough to give him away. Nothing answered. The furnace hummed. Water trickled. Ashley lowered her voice. "Mara," she whispered, "stand behind me." I did, my back pressed against the cold wall. I could feel the vibration of the furnace through the concrete. Jonah took a step toward the shelves, then another. "If someone's here," he said, louder now, "this is private property. We've called the police." A lie. A necessary one. The shelves loomed closer. Boxes labeled holiday, cables, books. One box at the bottom was torn open, the cardboard bent like it had been handled recently. Another scrape. Closer this time. "Jonah," Ashley hissed. "Stop." He did. His face had gone pale, a sheen of sweat at his hairline. "Go upstairs," he said to us, too quickly. "I'll check." "No," I said. The word came out sharp. No splitting up. This was my fear now, loud and clear. Someone unseen, using the space I couldn't map, slipping into corners I didn't check. Ashley nodded. "We moved together," she said, slow. The scrape turned into a muffled thump, a box falling, something shifting weight. From behind the shelves, a cough sounded. Human, unmistakably human. My breath caught in my throat. Ashley's hand tightened on the flashlight. "Hey," a voice said, rough and hoarse. "Hey, don't freak out." Jonah's jaw clenched. "Who are you?" he demanded. A pause, then, I'm leaving. I didn't know anyone was home. "You were barefoot," I said before I could stop myself. "Why were you barefoot?" Another pause, longer. The water heater chose that moment to make a loud clank. The leak intensified, the stream widening. "I slipped," the voice said, "on the water." Ashley glanced at the spreading puddle, then back at the shelves. "You need to come out where we can see you," she said. Silence. Then footsteps wet, slapping, retreating away from us, toward the back of the basement. "There's no exit back there," Jonah shouted. But the footsteps kept going. And then there was a metallic rattle, faint but distinct, coming from the direction of the crawlspace door we hadn't noticed yet. My stomach dropped again. "There is now," Ashley said quietly. The water kept rising, inch by inch, creeping toward the base of the stairs. Stood there, three of us, trapped between a flooding basement and a person who knew the hidden spaces of our house better than we did. And none of us had signal. The crawlspace door was a rectangle of darker wood set low into the back wall, half hidden behind a leaning shelf of paint cans. Once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. The little metal latch at the top rattled again, harder this time, like someone testing it. "He's not supposed to be back there," Jonah said, more to himself than to us. The basement's layout snapped into sharper focus in my head. Stairs behind us. Furnace and water heater to the right. Shelving and boxes along the left wall. Crawlspace dead ahead, low and narrow, probably running under the den and part of the kitchen. A place you'd only know existed if you'd gone looking. The water crept closer. closer to the stairs, thin but persistent. It touched the bottom step and soaked into the carpet immediately, darkening it. Ashley swore under her breath. If that hits the electrical panel, where is the panel? I asked. Back wall near the crawl space, Jonah said. Of course it was. Another rattle, then silence. We all stood frozen, listening for breathing, movement, anything. The furnace kicked on again, a sudden roar of air that made me jump. For half a second, the sound twisted into something like footsteps, fast and heavy, and my heart slammed against my ribs. Ashley snapped the flashlight beam upward, wild. Then it settled. Just the ducts. Just forced air. Okay, she said, voice shaking despite her effort. That's just the furnace. That was nothing. Misdirection, my brain whispered. Don't trust it anyway. Attempt one came out of sheer instinct. Jonah, Ashley said, shut off the water main. That buys us time. The main's upstairs, he said. Then go, she said. Now, he hesitated, eyes flicking to the crawl space, to us. I'll be fine, I said, even though the words tasted like a lie. We stay by the stairs. Jonah nodded once and bolted up the steps 2 at a time, slipping slightly on the wet carpet, but catching himself on the handrail. The basement door slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Ashley and I stood back to back without discussing it, her flashlight aimed at the crawlspace door, mine my phone, useless as a light, but still clenched in my hand aimed at the shelves. Talk to me, she murmured. Keep your voice steady. About what? I whispered. Anything. I focused on something solid. The footprints, I said. They were adult-sized, narrow, maybe a man. Barefoot in winter, Ashley said. That's not great. A faint scraping came from the crawlspace again, followed by a soft grunt. The latch rattled, then stopped. He's stuck, Ashley whispered. Or he thinks we are. My calves started to burn from standing tense, knees locked. The air felt colder down here, damp seeping through my jeans. Then something hit the back of the shelves. Not hard, a bump. Enough to make a paint can wobble. I gasped before I could stop myself. Ashley raised the flashlight, beam shaking. Don't, she said sharply. Don't react. The wobbling can tipped and fell, clanging loudly against the concrete. The noise ricocheted off the walls, deafening. And then nothing. Silence except for water and furnace. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. That was him, I said. Ashley swallowed. Or gravity, we waited. Seconds stretched. My hands tingled. Another sound came not from the crawlspace, but above us. A thud on the ceiling. Then another, farther away. He's running, I said. He's under the house. Ashley's eyes widened. Crawlspace connects to the front. If there's an exterior vent, a new noise cut her off, the basement door handle rattling. Relief and fear collided in my chest. Mara, Jonah's voice, muffled but unmistakable. Water's off. But the handle rattled again. Harder, Jonah, Ashley called. The rattling stopped. For a terrible second, no one spoke. Then the handle turned slowly. The door opened. Jonah stood there, breathless, eyes wild. Someone tried to lock me out, he said. There's a chair wedged against the kitchen door. That was attempt 1, partial success. The water slowed to a stop, but the problem had multiplied. He knows the house, Ashley said, or he's learning fast. Attempt 2 was riskier. We need to get out, I said. Front door together. Jonah shook his head. If he's under the house, he'll hear us. He could come up through the crawl space again. And the basement's flooding, Ashley said. We can't stay. My brain latched onto procedure. Police, I said. Landline. There isn't one, Jonah said. But my car, if I can get to it. Keys, Ashley asked. In my jacket, he said, upstairs by the back door, which was blocked. Ashley exhaled slowly. Okay. We moved to the den. There's another exit to the backyard, right? Yes, Jonah said, sliding door. Then that's our path, she said. Mara, you stay between us. Flashlights up. We don't run unless we have to. We moved as one, stepping carefully through the shallow water, shoes soaking. My socks squelched unpleasantly, a sensory detail my brain latched onto like a warning bell. Halfway to the stairs, the power cut. Not a dramatic blackout, just a soft click, the furnace dying mid-hum, the basement plunging into thick darkness. Ashley cursed. Electrical panel, water, Jonah said. It must have reached. His flashlight flickered, then steadied. Mine was useless now, a dark mirror reflecting my own wide eyes. We climbed fast, hearts hammering. The basement door loomed, a darker rectangle in the dark. Another thud came from the ceiling above the den. Closer this time. Move, Ashley hissed. We burst into the den, the air warmer, carpet dry. Jonah slammed the basement door shut and twisted the lock with shaking hands. The den was dim, but not dark. Late afternoon light filtered through the small windows. Furniture sat half arranged, boxes still unpacked. A couch, a coffee table, the sliding glass door at the back, curtains drawn. A shadow passed across the frosted glass. Don't, Ashley said automatically, raising her flashlight. The shadow resolved into a raccoon scrambling across the deck railing, claws clicking. It froze when the beam hit it, eyes reflecting back like coins. I laughed then, a hysterical bark that turned into a sob halfway through. Okay, Ashley said, too loud. Okay, that's explainable. My legs shook. I can't, I know, she said. I know, that was misdirection. A mercy almost. Then the sliding door handle jiggled. Not an animal, too deliberate, too slow. Jonah moved in front of us without thinking. Back, he said, get back. The handle jiggled again. Harder. Police are on their way, a voice called from outside. The same rough voice from the basement. Just open the door. Let's not make this worse. My blood roared in my ears. That's a lie, Ashley whispered. They don't announce like that. The handle jerked sharply. The glass rattled in its frame. Behind us, a new sound, wood creaking, from the hallway leading to the front of the house. Footsteps. Inside. He's in, Jonah said hoarsely. The den suddenly felt too small, the exits collapsing in my mental map. The sliding door banged once more, then stopped. Silence. Then the front door slammed upstairs. A lock clicked. Ashley's face went pale. Point of no return, she said quietly. We were trapped inside our own house, lights out, water rising below us, and the person who knew the hidden spaces best had just sealed the obvious way out. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the wet basement smell, not the stale cardboard and old paint. This was sharper, hot plastic, the faint tang of something electrical overheating. Ashley noticed it too. Her nostrils flared, and her eyes went past Jonah's shoulder toward the hallway like she could see through walls. Panel, she whispered. Something's arcing. Jonah had his back to the den door, one hand on the knob like he could hold the whole house shut by force. The flashlight in his other hand threw a jittery circle of light on the carpet. I was crouched behind the couch, knees to my chest, because sitting on the floor felt like being smaller made me safer. It didn't. From upstairs, a drawer slid open. Then another, slow, deliberate, like someone shopping. He's looking for keys, Ashley murmured, or something sharp. Why lock us in then? I asked. My voice came out thin. Ashley's jaw tightened. Control. He wants you to feel it. A thump from the front of the house, boot against wall, maybe. Then the creak of the stair landing. Footsteps started down toward the den. Jonah's shoulders went rigid. He whispered, "No, no, no," like bargaining with physics. Ashley raised her flashlight, beam pinned on the den doorway. "We don't wait for him to pick us off," she said, low and fierce. "We move. We make noise. We make it messy." I shook my head before she even finished. "He's between us and the front door." "Then we don't go that way," she said. Jonah glanced at the sliding glass door, curtains still drawn. Outside, the deck, and then the backyard sloped down to a row of bare trees. The neighbor's house was visible through them, lights on, normal life happening within shouting distance. "The slider's locked," Jonah said. I checked. Ashley's eyes flicked to the floor, to the boxes stacked by the wall, to the coffee table we hadn't decided if we hated yet. "Break it," she said. Jonah stared at her. "That's Ashley. The front door's locked," she snapped. "The basement's flooding, the power's out, and someone is walking down our stairs. We break the glass, we scream, we run." I swallowed hard. My private fear, unknown spaces, corners you can't see, was now a real person in our house. And the idea of running through the dark toward anything unknown made my stomach twist. But staying was worse. "How?" Jonah hissed. "With what?" Ashley's flashlight beam swung to the washer and dryer note in my pocket, then passed it to the corner of the den where Jonah had tossed his tool bag earlier in the day. The one he'd brought down from the car. "A hammer," she said. "You said you had tools." Jonah shook his head, already moving. He grabbed the bag, unzipped it with trembling fingers. Metal clinked. A flashlight, a tape measure, a small claw hammer. The footsteps on the stairs paused. A voice drifted down the hallway. Close now. "Hey," the man called, almost conversational. "You don't have to do this." Ashley's gaze met mine. Her pupils were huge. "Mara," she whispered, "when Jonah hits the glass, you scream. Like you're hurt, like he's killing you. Get the neighbor's attention." My mouth went dry. "I can't." "Yes, you can," she said, and something in her tone didn't allow another option. Jonah's hand tightened around the hammer. He looked at me, apologetic and terrified all at once. "I'm sorry," he mouthed, as if breaking our own door was a sin. The den doorway creaked. A silhouette filled it, broad shoulders, a hood, the shine of wet fabric. The flashlight caught the edge of his face. Stubble, chapped lips, eyes too bright. His feet were bare, wet, toes pink with cold. He held something in his hand. Not a knife, a long screwdriver, the kind you'd pull from a tool belt. "My God," Ashley whispered. The man's gaze flicked between us, the hammer, the sliding door. He swallowed like he hadn't expected the hammer. "Listen," he said, voice rough. "I'm leaving, I swear. I needed a place for a night. The crawl space, I didn't think." "You wrote the note," Jonah said, hoarse. "You put it in our dryer." The man's face twitched. Shame or anger, I couldn't tell. "I didn't put it in your dryer," he said too fast. "I put it by the vent. It must have." "Stop," Ashley snapped. "Back up. Hands where I can see them." The man's eyes flicked to the hallway behind him, to the stairs. A quick mental map, same as mine. He took one step forward instead. Jonah lifted the hammer. His arm shook. "I don't want to hit you," Jonah said. "I don't." The man's mouth tightened. "Then don't." He moved suddenly, lunging toward Jonah, not to stab, but to shove past him toward the den door, toward the hallway, toward whatever he wanted upstairs. Ashley reacted first. She slammed her shoulder into the man's side, driving him into the wall. The screwdriver clattered to the floor, skittering across the carpet toward me. The man cursed, a sharp, ugly sound. He swung his elbow backward and caught Ashley in the cheekbone. The crack of impact was sickeningly solid. Ashley stumbled, hand flying to her face, blood already bright on her fingers. I screamed, not acting, real. Jonah surged forward, hammer raised, but the man grabbed Jonah's wrist with both hands and twisted hard. Jonah yelped genuine pain, and the hammer dropped. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. For a second, it was just bodies and breath and panic. The kind of struggle you see on a sidewalk sometimes and can't believe is real until you smell the sweat. Go, Ashley shouted at me, voice wet. Oh, my eyes landed on the screwdriver near my knee. Seated object, my brain thought stupidly. Like this was a story I could control. Like details meant safety. I grabbed it. My hand slipped because my palm was slick with sweat. The man shoved Jonah backward into the coffee table. Wood cracked. The table tilted, spilling a box of tools Ashley had brought down earlier: pretzels, beer, keys. Jonah's jacket keys. They slid across the carpet and disappeared under the couch. Jonah groaned, clutching his side. His face had gone gray. The man saw the keys fall. His eyes lit with desperate calculation. He dove toward the couch. Ashley lurched after him, but she was off balance, blinking through blood. She grabbed his hoodie, fingers tangling in fabric. He yanked free. The hoodie ripped at the seam, exposing a dirty thermal shirt underneath. He crawled halfway under the couch, arm reaching. This was my fear incarnate. A person disappearing into a space you can't see, where you can't tell what he's doing until it's too late. I didn't think. I acted. I dropped to my knees and slammed the couch's edge down onto his forearm. He screamed a raw animal sound, and his head banged the underside of the couch. He thrashed, but his arm was pinned awkwardly, wrist twisted. "Help me," I yelled, voice cracking. Jonah, coughing, pushed himself up and grabbed the couch from the other side, levering it down harder. The man's shoulder popped in a sound I will never forget, like someone snapping a thick rubber band. He shrieked again, then went silent except for harsh panting. Ashley, shaking, fumbled in her pocket. "I have," she gasped. "1 bar, call," I said. "Call now." Her phone screen lit, dim but alive. 1 bar, flickering. She jabbed at it like it was a bomb. 911, the man bucked beneath the couch, trying to drag his arm free. His fingers scrabbled along the carpet, searching blindly. They found the keys. I saw it, his hand curling around the metal ring. "No," Jonah rasped, and shifted his weight, pressing down with everything he had. The man's grip loosened. The keys slid from his fingers and clinked against the screwdriver in my hand. Ashley's phone connected with a crackle. "There's a man in our house," she said, voice shaking but clear. "He broke in. He's in the den. She sucked in a breath, eyes wide. "We're holding him, please, holding him, like we were the bad guys." The smell of hot plastic got stronger. And then from the hallway, a faint snap and a hiss. Jonah's head jerked up. That's smoke curled under the den door frame, thin and gray. Ashley's face went blank with shock. "Electrical," she whispered. The panel, the basement water had reached something after all, or the intruder had, or both. The man under the couch started laughing. Not loud, just a breathy, broken sound. "You're gonna burn," he whispered, voice muffled by upholstery. My stomach turned to ice. "Get him out," Jonah choked. "We have to get out." Ashley's phone was still pressed to her ear. "We need fire," she said, voice rising. "The power's out, there's smoke. The den felt suddenly smaller, the air thickening. My throat scratched. The couch was still pinning the man's arm, but now the choice wasn't about control. It was about time. If we left him, we'd be leaving a human being in a burning house. If we freed him, we'd be freeing the person who trapped us. Jonah looked at me, eyes glassy. His fear of looking foolish was gone, replaced by something rawer, the knowledge that whatever we did next would stain us. Ashley wiped blood from her cheek with the back of her hand and swallowed hard. "Mara," she said, voice hoarse, "we can't carry all of this." I tasted smoke, heard the distant wail of something, sirens maybe, far away. And then the den's smoke alarm began to chirp, weakly at first, then louder, shrill, and insistent. We lifted the couch. The man tore his arm free with a strangled cry, scrambling backward, clutching his shoulder. Jonah snatched the keys and shoved them into my hand. "Run," he said. We did, not clean, not heroic. Jonah limped, gasping, one hand pressed to his ribs. Ashley stumbled, dizzy, still on the phone. I sprinted ahead to the sliding door, hands shaking so badly the key wouldn't go in on the first try. Behind us, the man lurched to his feet, eyes wild, deciding whether to chase, flee, or fight. The smoke alarm screamed. The key finally turned. The sliding door slid open with a harsh grind, cold air slapping my face like a reset button. We tumbled onto the deck, coughing, screaming for help. The backyard suddenly enormous and exposed and real. And behind us, inside the house we'd been so sure would keep us safe, something cracked and flared orange through the den window. Not a ghost, not a curse, just water, wires, and a stranger who had been listening from below. The cold did the first real work of bringing us back. It hit my lungs hard when we stumbled off the deck and into the backyard, sharp enough to override the smoke burn in my throat. I bent over with my hands on my knees and gagged, spit stringing onto the dead grass. Ashley sank down against the fence, still clutching her phone, the dispatcher's voice tinny and unreal in the open air. Jonah made it 3 steps and then sat down heavily, back against the house, breathing in short, careful pulls like each one cost him something. Inside, the smoke alarm screamed until it cut out abruptly. A pop followed, then a dull woof, not an explosion, just something giving way. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on one by one. A door opened. Someone yelled, "You okay over there?" Like this was a grill fire or a busted pipe. "Call 911, Ashley shouted back, even though she already had. Her cheek had swollen, the skin around it mottled purple and red. Blood streaked down to her jawline, where she'd smeared it without realizing. Headlights swung into the driveway. Then more. The first police cruiser rolled up just as a fire engine screamed around the corner, lights strobing red and white across the siding of our house, across the trees, across Jonah's face. Hands guided us away from the house. A firefighter wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, even though I kept saying I wasn't cold. Another pressed oxygen tubing under Jonah's nose, while a paramedic palpated his ribs gently, apologizing every time Jonah flinched. Police voices layered over each other, clipped and professional. Is anyone still inside? There was a male, barefoot, crawlspace access, electrical panel. I answered questions automatically, like I was filling out a form. Name. Age. Did I know the man? No. Had he threatened us verbally? He said we were going to burn. Did he have a weapon? A screwdriver? Where is he now? An officer asked. I pointed with a shaking hand toward the back of the house. He went that way, I said, even though I hadn't seen him leave. It felt important to be precise, even when precision was a lie. They found him curled behind the neighbor's shed 10 minutes later, shoulder hanging at a wrong angle, teeth chattering so hard the cuffs rattled. He didn't resist. He kept saying, "I didn't mean to no one in particular." The fire was contained quickly. Not nothing, there was damage. The electrical panel was charred, black spiderwebs crawling up the studs. The basement ceiling was soaked, where firefighters had sprayed through the den floor. But the house still stood. The crawl space was longer than the inspector's diagram suggested. It ran under the den, the kitchen, and part of the front entry. There was an exterior vent behind a hedge, loose enough that someone thin and determined could squeeze through. The intruder had been sleeping down there on and off for weeks, according to the officer who briefed us later. He'd lost his job, then his apartment. He'd been moving at night, listening, learning the rhythms of houses like ours. "Why the note?" Jonah asked hoarsely from the back of the ambulance. The officer hesitated. "He says he didn't put it in your dryer," he said. "Claims he wrote it weeks ago and left it by the vent. Might have gotten picked up when you ran the HVAC. Hard to say, hard to say." That phrase lodged in my chest and stayed there. Ashley got 3 stitches on her cheekbone and a concussion diagnosis with a list of things she wasn't supposed to do that week. No screens, no alcohol, no driving. She laughed when the nurse told her, then cried without warning, face collapsing in on itself. I held her hand and counted her breaths, because it was easier than counting my own. Jonah's ribs were bruised but not broken. He took shallow breaths for days afterward and apologized every time he winced, like pain was something he should have planned better. I had smoke inhalation and scrapes on my knees and palms. The ER doctor asked if I wanted to talk to someone. I said yes. And then, when the social worker showed up, I couldn't find the words. Everything I tried sounded like an overreaction. We didn't sleep in the house that night, or the next. The insurance company put us in a hotel near the highway, the kind with thin walls and a continental breakfast that tasted like paper. Jonah slept sitting up in a chair because lying down hurt. Ashley slept with the bathroom light on and woke up every hour. I lay awake listening to doors slam in the hallway and tried not to map the exits. Statements were taken, photos snapped, evidence bagged. The screwdriver was logged, the hammer too, the torn hoodie, the footprints photographed before the water erased them. The note went into a clear plastic sleeve. "Do you want it back?" the detective asked me later. I shook my head. The paper looked smaller in the sleeve, less accusatory, like it had already said everything it was going to say. The man was charged with breaking and entering, assault, criminal mischief. The fire was ruled accidental, water intrusion into compromised wiring. The house inspector came back with a longer list this time, his pen tapping thoughtfully at the crawlspace diagram like it had personally offended him. Friends brought casseroles we didn't eat. Neighbors waved too hard. Everyone had a story about a cousin or a coworker or a thing they'd heard once on the news. Jonah installed new locks again, and motion lights, and cameras that pinged his phone whenever a raccoon crossed the yard. He checked them obsessively, then apologized, then checked them again. Ashley went back to her apartment after 3 days and left a toothbrush behind. She texted me pictures of her bruise as it faded, purple to yellow to nothing, like proof that things healed. I started therapy. I learned words for what my body was doing: hypervigilance, startle response. I learned grounding techniques that worked until they didn't. The house smelled different when we moved back in. Cleaner, sharper, like it was trying too hard. The den ceiling had been patched, the basement dried out, the electrical panel replaced with something new and white and innocent looking. The crawlspace vent was sealed with a metal grate screwed tight into the brick. I watched them do it. We never played hide and seek in the basement. Not that we ever had before. The idea had just existed. A joke Jonah made once about future kids. I laughed then. I don't now. Life resumed in the ways it always does. Laundry, work, groceries. Jonah fixed the dryer. It paused once, weeks later, and I felt my heart stutter until it started again. The last thing small, stupid came when I was putting away winter coats. I reached into the pocket of a jacket we hadn't worn since before the fire and felt paper. My fingers went numb instantly. I pulled it out. It was a receipt, crumpled, harmless. I laughed at myself, the sound brittle in my throat, and shoved it back where it belonged. Still, sometimes at night, when the house settles and the ducks click, I think about how someone listened to us from below, how close ordinary life sits to the edge of something else. And I keep the basement door locked, not because I believe in monsters, because I know better now what fits into the spaces we don't look. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. Welcome to Mia Horror Stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The first time I noticed it, it was small enough that I could have laughed it off. My mom was stirring sauce on the stove, tomato, garlic. The heavy sweet smell of basil bruised between her fingers, and she said, without looking up, "Welcome to Maple Mart. Would you like to sign up for our rewards program today?" Not as a joke, not as a weird mom thing, just flat, like she'd pressed play on a sentence and let it run. I was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with my backpack still on one shoulder, keys digging into my palm, trying to remember if I'd already paid my car insurance. The clock over the microwave clicked from 6:13 to 6:14 with that cheap plastic thunk. Outside, our street was doing its usual early evening thing, sprinklers whispering in the yards, a dog barking twice, and then giving up, someone's bass heavy music muffled through closed car windows. "Mom," I said. She kept stirring, wrist making the same perfect circle again and again. The spoon tapped the side of the pot every third rotation. Tap, tap, tap. "Would you like to sign up," she repeated, "for our rewards program today?" My dad was at the table with his laptop open, one earbud in, looking at something with columns, probably the monthly budget spreadsheet he loved more than any human relationship. He didn't look up. He just said, "He's home," like he was confirming a delivery. Let the backpack slide off my shoulder, and it hit the tile with a soft thud. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, an email probably. I didn't check. I didn't want to add another tiny problem to the pile. I'm not at Maple Mart, I said, trying to keep my voice light, because I'd learned the hard way that anything heavier could ricochet around this house for days. I'm at my home. Your home. The sauce made one slow bubble, a quiet pop. My mom's shoulders were too still, like she was bracing for a photo. Then she blinked. One long blink that looked more like a reset than tiredness. When her eyes opened, there was the normal warmth there again, her usual little squint, the one she got when she was concentrating on not burning dinner. "Hey, honey," she said, and the words had weight again. How was work? Like nothing had happened. I stared at her, waiting for a smile, a little laugh, something to show she knew what she'd done. My dad finally looked up and gave me a half wave with 2 fingers, like I was a coworker passing his desk. It's important to say, my parents weren't bad people. They weren't cruel. They were just tired and set in their routines, and if I'm being honest, kind of invisible to each other lately. My mom worked a pharmacy counter shift that started too early. My dad ran it for a small insurance office and spent half his life on calls with people who still called the monitor the computer. Their conversations had turned into logistics. Milk, oil change, did you pay the water bill? Love expressed as reminder texts and folded laundry. So I could have filed the Maple Mart thing away as stress, a brain hiccup, an accidental mash-up of customer service scripts. If she'd been working retail, it would have made perfect sense. Except she didn't work retail. She hadn't in 20 years, and she'd said it like she meant it. I moved into the kitchen anyway, because moving felt safer than standing still. The overhead light had that faint hum that always made my temples itch if I paid attention long enough. The dishwasher was running, a slow churn of water behind its door. My mom's phone sat face up on the counter. No notifications, just her lock screen photo, the 3 of us at a beach in Oregon a few summers back, sunburnt and smiling in a way that felt like another lifetime. My name is Evan Mercer, 26 male. I've lived back at my parents' house in Portland, Oregon for 7 months, ever since my lease got hiked up and my bank account stopped pretending it had a bottomless pit. I tell people it's temporary. I tell myself the same thing. I work evenings at a small print and ship shop off Sandy Boulevard, laminating posters, making copies, pretending not to notice when people bring in legal documents that look like the end of their marriages. There's something I don't say out loud. I'm scared of becoming permanent, not just in the house, but in the person. A guy who watches life happen to other people and keeps making plans while the years collect dust. I've gotten good at avoiding big feelings by staying busy with small tasks. It's not heroic. It's just easier. My mom scraped her spoon against the pot, tasted a little sauce, added salt, and frowned at the bottle like it had insulted her. Laura Mercer, 54. Female appeared fully again in that frown my mom's expressive face. Her hair clipped up with the same cheap plastic claw she'd owned since I was in middle school. She wore her pharmacy scrubs under an old cardigan because she always came home cold. "You look wiped," she said to me, the way she always did, even if I didn't. Greg Mercer, 57. Male shut his laptop halfway, not all the way, like he wanted the option to escape back into it. He was still in his work polo, collar slightly bent, the kind of man who used to run half marathons and now got winded carrying groceries. "How many packages today?" he asked. "Too many," I said. I went to the fridge and pulled out a seltzer. The cold can hissed when I cracked it open, and that sound sharp, normal felt like proof that the world still made sense. Mom reached for the pepper, and again her hand paused midair, fingers hovering like they'd forgotten what to do. Her gaze drifted toward the dining room wall where we kept a little corkboard with coupons and my dad's insurance papers and the emergency plumber magnet. She stared at it like it was a menu. I watched her face the way you watch someone you love when you're trying not to be dramatic. I waited for her eyes to track, to settle, to show recognition. She said, very softly, "Please place your items in the bagging area." My stomach did something stupid and small, like it had slipped off a step. "Mom," I said, and I hated how my voice tightened. "What are you doing?" The spoon stayed suspended above the pot. Sauce dripped off the edge in one slow line. A stain formed on the stovetop. My dad frowned. "Laura," she turned her head toward us, but her eyes didn't lock on mine. They didn't lock on my dad's either. They pointed in our direction without arriving. Her face was blank in a way that didn't feel like tiredness. It felt like waiting. And like a light flicking back on, her focus snapped into place. She blinked once, twice. "God," she said with a short laugh that didn't match her eyes. "Sorry, I'm scattered today." My dad stood up, chair legs screeching against tile. The sound cut through the kitchen like a thrown object. "You okay? You dizzy?" "I'm fine," she said too quickly. "Just a long day. You know, people yelling about copies like it's my fault the universe needs money." She tried to keep it casual, tried to make it into the kind of complaint we'd heard 100 times. But her fingers were trembling as she set the spoon down, trembling in a way that made me think of cold mornings and caffeine. I leaned forward a little, lowering my voice. "You said stuff, weird stuff." She looked annoyed for a second, real annoyance, the familiar spark, and then the annoyance slid into something else, something guarded. "What stuff?" Dad was watching her closely now, not the way he watched the budget, but the way he watched me when I'd come home late as a teenager and tried to pretend I hadn't been drinking. His mouth was tight. His eyes kept flicking to her hands. "You just said like store lines," I said. "Maple Mart, bagging area, rewards program." Mom's jaw worked, like she was chewing a thought she didn't want to swallow. "I didn't." "You did," I said. I couldn't help it. I sounded too sure, too accusatory. "Twice." The kitchen went quiet in that particular way kitchens do when the appliances keep doing their thing, but nobody talks. The dishwasher churned. The fridge clicked. The sauce simmered quietly like it didn't want to intrude. My mom looked past me, toward the dark hallway that led to the bedrooms. Her eyes lingered there for a beat too long. When she spoke again, her voice was normal, but the words were too polished, like she'd practiced them. "Evan, you're stressed," she said. "You're working too much. You've been sleeping weird hours. And you've always had that imagination." My dad's head snapped toward her. "Laura, what?" she said, too sharp, then softer. "I'm fine." Dad opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression tight, warning, made him stop. He cleared his throat instead. Maybe we should do a quick check-in, blood pressure. You've been skipping lunch." I said I'm fine, she repeated, but her eyes flicked to the hallway again, and this time her hand went to the edge of the counter like she needed something solid. In that moment, I wanted to believe the easiest explanation: exhaustion, low blood sugar, stress, a weird autopilot phrase, a couple of misfires. The human brain is glitchy. People get through days by running scripts, except she hadn't sounded like a human on autopilot. She desounded like something performing a human. I told myself that was dramatic. I told myself I was spiraling because I hadn't eaten since noon, and my own brain was looking for a problem it could chew on. My dad reached for his phone. "I'm going to call." "No." My mom's voice cracked, just a hairline fracture. She smiled immediately after like she'd slapped a bandage over it. "No hospitals, no making it a thing." Dad lowered the phone, but he didn't put it away. "Okay," he said too calmly. "No hospitals, just Laura, tell me what's going on." She stared at him. For a second, her face did that blank thing again, like the expression had been peeled off. Then she blinked and seemed to return. "I'm tired," she said. "That's all. I want to eat dinner and not talk about my brain like it's a broken appliance." I could see the choice forming between the three of us, hanging in the kitchen like steam. Push now and risk making her shut down completely, or let it go and pretend it was nothing. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the window blinds in bright stripes. The light moved across my mom's face, and in that moving light, her expression looked briefly unfamiliar, as if it belonged to a stranger trying to imitate her. My dad looked at me, and I could tell he wanted me to back off. He wanted a quiet evening. He wanted normalcy. My mom turned back to the stove and started stirring again, the spoon returning to that perfect circle, tap, tap, tap against the pot, as if the motion itself could keep everything in place. And then she said very lightly, almost like a joke she was forcing herself to land, "So, who wants garlic bread?" Dad exhaled. He nodded like that solved something. "Yeah," he said, "garlic bread sounds good." I stood there, seltzer sweating in my hand, and watched my mom's back, watched her shoulders, listened to the spoon, listened to the dishwasher, listened to the faint hum of the overhead light. I could let this go, or I could follow the direction her eyes kept going down the hallway and see what she'd been looking at. I swallowed, and my throat felt dry despite the carbonation. "Mom," I said quietly, "why do you keep staring at the hall?" Her stirring slowed, just for a second. Then she kept going. "What hallway?" she asked, without turning around. And that was the moment we had to choose. Eat dinner and pretend this didn't happen, or stand up and make it real. The first real problem arrived on a timer. It started with my dad's phone vibrating against the table. Not ringing, buzzing over and over, like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and unlocked it. "Power company," he said. "Outage alert." My mom didn't look up. She was slicing the garlic bread with too much pressure, the serrated knife sawing hard enough that crumbs scattered across the counter. "We don't have an outage," she said. Dad tilted the phone so I could see it. A block of text, gray and official looking. Land service interruption area. Any 47th 52nd Ave start. 6:45 p.m. estimated restore. 9:30 p.m. That's in 15 minutes, he said. I checked the microwave clock. 6:29. The seconds ticked louder than they should have. Mom set the knife down, perfectly aligned with the edge of the cutting board. "No one told me about this." "They don't tell you personally," Dad said. "They just do it." She wiped her hands on a towel that was already clean. "I don't like the dark." This wasn't news. My mom had always hated it, not in a childish way, but in a practical, irritated way. She liked to see what she was doing. She liked lights on in rooms no one was in. Darkness felt inefficient to her. "I'll get the lantern from the garage," Dad said, already moving. "And the headlamps." "I'll grab candles," I said, mostly because I needed something to do. Standing still felt like waiting for a test result. As Dad headed toward the back door, Mom's eyes tracked him. Then they flicked again to the hallway. Same pause, same slight tension in her jaw. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice low. "Seriously, what's with the hallway?" She didn't answer right away. She opened the oven, slid the garlic bread inside, closed it, set a timer. 12:00. The beeps were too loud. "There's nothing with the hallway," she said. "You're hovering." "I'm concerned." She turned on me, and for a second her annoyance was sharp and familiar enough to be comforting. "About what? That I'm tired? That I said something weird earlier? Jesus, Evan," Dad called from the garage, his voice muffled. "Where'd I put the spare batteries?" "In the red bin," Mom said automatically. Too automatically. I went to the pantry for candles. The light flickered, not off, just a brief dip, like the house had inhaled and thought better of it. My phone buzzed with the same outage alert. 15 minutes. This should have been boring, mildly inconvenient, an excuse to complain and eat dinner by candlelight. Instead, my chest felt tight, like I'd already missed a step and was trying to recover mid-fall. I pulled out 3 candles and a lighter and turned back toward the kitchen. Mom was standing very still in front of the back hallway entrance, the one that led past the bathroom to the bedrooms. Her shoulders were squared. Her hands were clasped in front of her like she was waiting for instructions. "Mom," I said. She spoke without turning around. "Do not open the door for anyone." The words landed wrong not because they were scary, but because of how she said them. Clear, flat, directive, no context. "What door?" I asked. "The front," she said. "The back. Any door." I laughed, a quick bark I didn't mean. "Okay, I wasn't planning on it." Came back in with the lantern and headlamps, pausing when he saw her posture. "Laura," she turned then, smiling too fast. "Power's going out. Just basic safety. People take advantage." Dad hesitated. "Take advantage of what?" "Darkness," she said, and then, after a beat, disruption. The word choice was odd enough that I noticed it, filed it away. Disruption was something my dad said in meetings, not something my mom said about crime. "Mom," I said carefully, "did something happen at work today?" She opened her mouth, closed it, her eyes flicked to the hallway again. "No," she said, "nothing." The lights went out at exactly 6:45. Not a flicker this time, just a clean cut, like someone had reached in and unplugged the day. The hum of the overhead light vanished. The dishwasher died mid-churn, leaving a hollow quiet behind. Outside, I heard other houses reacting, someone swearing, a garage door whining to a stop, a car alarm chirping once and falling silent. Dad turned on the lantern. The soft yellow glow filled the kitchen unevenly, stretching shadows into the corners. It smelled faintly like plastic and old batteries. "Okay," he said, too brisk. "No problem, we're fine." The oven timer beeped in the dark, shrill and insistent. Mom startled like it had shouted her name. She turned it off too hard. We sat down to eat. The 3 of us, lit from below, our faces half familiar. Forks scraped. Bread crackled. Somewhere down the street, a dog started barking and didn't stop. I tried to tell myself this was just my brain stacking coincidences. Stress plus outage plus earlier weirdness equaled unease. That's how humans work. We find patterns even when there aren't any. Then the doorbell rang. One clear chime, powered by a battery backup, I knew dimly. We'd installed it last year. Mom stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and hit the floor. "No," she said. Dad blinked. "What?" No one opens it, she said. Her voice was low now, urgent. Do not interact. Laura, Dad said, frowning. It's probably a neighbor. Or the doorbell rang again. 2 quick presses this time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Power's out. Need to check your meter, utility worker. Dad pulled his phone out at the same time. I got a text, he said. So did I said. Mom shook her head hard enough that her hair clip rattled. They don't text. They don't come door to door during an outage. That's not true, Dad said, though he didn't sound certain. Sometimes there's no badge, she said. No truck. We could hear the person outside now. Footsteps on the porch. A muffled voice through the door. Hello, power company. My heart was pounding. I hated how part of me wanted to open the door just to make this stop. Just to restore normalcy. That same part of me that hated conflict, that wanted life to go back to scripts and routines. Dad moved toward the door anyway. I'm just going to, Mom stepped between him and the door. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were sharp. Focused. Greg, please. He stopped, looked at her, really looked. Why are you acting like this? Another knock. Firmer, sir, the voice said. Ma'am, I just need to take a look at your panel. Won't take long. I swallowed. Dad, maybe we should call the power company directly. The number on the website. Good, Mom said immediately. Too immediately. Do that. Dad hesitated, then nodded. He pulled up the website, squinting in the lantern light. The page took forever to load on spotty data. The knocking came again. Louder, impatient. Look, the man said, irritation creeping in. I've got a list. Your address is on it. Mom backed up a step, bumping into the hallway wall. Her breathing was shallow now. I noticed then, really noticed, that her phone wasn't on the counter anymore. It was gone. Mom, I said, where's your phone? She didn't answer. Laura, Dad said, sharper now. Where is your phone? She looked at me. For a split second, her face went blank again, like a screen between refreshes. Then she said, it's not safe. The knocking turned into a fist. 3 hard thumps that rattled the doorframe. Open up, the man said. This is getting ridiculous. Dad's phone finally connected. He put it on speaker. A recorded voice started talking about high call volumes. The lantern flickered. And from the hallway behind us, I heard something small and unmistakable. The soft click of a door opening. Mom's eyes went wide. I told you, she whispered. Don't let them in. Dad killed the speakerphone call after 30 seconds of hold music and a looped apology that sounded like it had been recorded in 2009. He didn't say anything for a beat. The lantern light caught the side of his face and made him look older than he was. We can call non-emergency, I said. My voice came out too thin. Mom was still staring down the hallway, one hand braced on the wall like she needed it. The hallway was a straight shot from the kitchen. Pantry door on the left, bathroom on the right, then the small bend toward the bedrooms. In the dark, it looked longer than it actually was, like a tunnel. At the far end, one of the bedroom doors stood open a few inches, the edge of it a black line against blacker darkness. Mom, Dad said, keeping his tone even, who opened that door? She swallowed. I didn't. You were with us, I said, trying to keep logic in the air. We'd hear footsteps. We had heard something. That click, the soft hinge whisper. But none of us had moved. The fist hit the front door again. Not a polite knock now, a demand. Hey, the man barked. I'm not leaving until someone talks to me. Dad looked toward the living room where the front door was past the archway, across the short carpeted section, then the entry tile. Okay, he said. Attempt 1, verify. Evan, grab my laptop. If the Wi-Fi's down, hotspot it. Check the outage map. If there's any note about crews. I nodded because it was something to do. My hands were shaking just enough that the laptop felt slippery. I carried it to the couch in the living room, keeping the lantern in the kitchen as our only steady light source. The living room was darker, just the dim spill from the lantern through the archway. Our front windows faced the street. Outside, the neighborhood was patchy with light. A few houses had generators, others were pitch black. Headlights passed occasionally, slow and cautious. The man outside was a shadow shape on the porch. I could see him through the side light window next to the door if I leaned, but the glass made him blur. Dad hovered behind me, staying back from the door, but close enough to feel like he could control it if it came down to it. "Don't open it," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Mom stood in the kitchen entrance, half in lantern light, half in shadow, like she couldn't decide which world she belonged to. I turned on my phone hotspot and tried to load the power company outage map. The laptop wheel spun. A line of text, connecting, then no internet. "Come on," I whispered, tapping the trackpad harder than it deserved. Outside, the man's voice rose. "I can see you moving in there. Just open the door." Dad leaned toward the sidelight window and called, "What's your name? What company?" There was a pause, like the man was annoyed he had to perform credentials. "PGE," he said. Name S, the rest got swallowed by the porch light being off and the street noise. But it sounded like he could have said a name. He added, "I've got a badge." "Show it to the window," Dad said. The man stepped closer. A rectangle flashed in the glass, some kind of ID card held up. In the low light, it was just a pale block with darker shapes. Could have been anything. A badge, a gym card, a library card. "Can you read that?" Dad asked me. I leaned in until my forehead almost touched the glass. The card was too far, too angled. The man's hand shook slightly. "No," I said, "it's blurry." Dad's jaw worked. "Okay," he called, "hold it up again and turn on your phone light." The man made a noise like a laugh. "I'm not doing a whole photo shoot. Just open the damn door." That was the first real crack. The moment he stopped pretending to be patient. Mom's voice came from behind us, too calm. "He's not supposed to get angry." Dad looked back at her. "Laura, what does that mean?" She blinked fast, like her eyes were dry. "It means he's not from the list." I abandoned the laptop and moved back into the kitchen. The garlic bread smell was stronger now, but it was cooling, slightly burnt at the edges. The lantern sat in the center of the table like a small sun. "Okay," Dad said, trying to reset. "Attempt 2, call 911 if he tries to force entry. Otherwise, we wait him out." "Non-emergency," I corrected automatically. Dad shot me a look. "If he breaks in, it becomes emergency." Mom's eyes darted to the hallway again. The open door at the end had widened just a little. Or maybe I only noticed it now. The gap looked like a mouth. "I'm going to close that," I said, already stepping toward the hallway. Mom's hand shot out and caught my wrist. Her grip was strong, surprising. "No, Mom," I said, forcing myself not to yank away. "It's just a door." Her pupils were wide in the lantern light. "It's not just a door." Dad's voice snapped. "Laura, stop it. Evan, just close it." Mom let go of me like she'd been burned. I walked into the hallway anyway, using my phone flashlight now. The beam carved out the familiar layout. Pantry shelves on the left, stacked with cereal and canned beans. Bathroom door on the right, slightly ajar. Then the bend toward my parents' room. And the small guest room I'd been sleeping in. The air in the hallway was cooler. It smelled faintly like laundry detergent and the eucalyptus oil my mom used in the diffuser. The open door at the end wasn't my parents' bedroom. It was the guest room. My room. My stomach tightened again. I hadn't left it open. I was annoyingly careful about doors because of a childhood habit. Close doors, close drawers, turn off lights. Control the small things. As I got closer, I heard something from inside. A soft rustle, like fabric shifting. My flashlight beam hit the edge of the door, then pushed into the room. For one awful second, it looked like someone was standing by my bed. A tall shape, motionless. I froze so hard my calves cramped. Then the shape moved, and the terror collapsed into something stupid and explainable. My coat, hanging on the back of the chair, had slipped. The hood had fallen forward, making it look like a head. I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob at the same time. "Jesus," I whispered. Behind me, Mom made a small sound, half gasp, half relief. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said, harsher than I meant. "It's nothing. My coat." I stepped into the room and pushed the door wider. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Old house, normal noises. My phone light swept across my bed, my backpack, my nightstand with a glass of water. Everything was where it should be, except my phone charger wasn't plugged in anymore. The cord lay on the floor, the end coiled like it had been yanked. Frowned and crouched, picking it up. The outlet was empty. I remembered plugging it in that morning. I remembered because I'd been annoyed the plug was loose. I heard the front door handle jiggle. Not a knock, not a fist, a deliberate test of the lock. Dad's voice cut through the hall. "Hey, stop that," the man outside responded, his tone cold now. "Open the door." The handle jiggled again. Harder. I stood up too fast and smacked my elbow on the doorframe. Pain shot down my forearm, sharp and bright. I swore under my breath, shaking my hand. Back in the kitchen, the lantern light flickered again, just a pulse, but it made Mom flinch like a reflex. Dad moved quickly to the entryway, staying behind the door, phone in hand. "I'm calling," he said. "Wait," Mom said. Dad ignored her and dialed. 911, the line went dead. Not busy, dead. The call dropped instantly, like the network had been cut. He stared at the screen. "What the?" I tried mine. Same thing. The call ended before it rang. "No service," I said, checking the bars. I still had 2. Data worked enough to send texts. But calls, nothing. Dad's face drained of color. "That's not normal." Mom's voice small. "It's happening." "What is happening?" Dad demanded. Mom opened her mouth, and again she did that blank reset thing, eyes unfocusing, expression flattening, like someone had paused her mid-thought. When she spoke, it wasn't to answer him. It was a script. "Please remain calm," she said, in that same flat cadence. "Help is on the way." Dad stared at her like he'd been slapped. Outside, the door handle jiggled again, and this time there was a dull thud against the wood, like a shoulder testing it. Dad grabbed the lantern off the table and shoved it into my hands. "Go to the back," he said. "Check the sliding door. Make sure it's locked." "Evan, now." My heart hammered. "Dad, go." I ran through the kitchen toward the back of the house, the lantern swinging, throwing shadows across cabinets and walls. The back door was at the end of the kitchen by the garage entry, and beyond it, the small laundry area, and then the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. I could picture it clearly, the patio, the grill, the fence line. As I reached the slider, I saw movement outside, someone crouched near the fence, just a dark shape shifting. I stumbled, catching myself on the counter. The lantern rattled. My shin slammed into a chair leg. Pain bloomed. I bit back a yell. The shape near the fence straightened and moved toward the back of the house. Then my lantern beam hit the sliding door handle. It was already halfway up, unlocked, and as I stared, the handle lifted the rest of the way, slow and steady from the outside. The glass door began to slide. That was the point where the option to retreat, or maybe it's nothing, still existed, snapped cleanly in two. Because someone was already coming in. The sliding door moved like it was trying not to make a sound. A slow scrape of rubber on track, a thin hiss of air. I lunged forward and grabbed the handle with both hands, yanking it back toward the frame. The glass shuddered under my palms, cold even through the lantern heat. On the other side, a dark shape filled the gap. Not a monster. A person in a hoodie, face turned away, one hand still on the edge of the glass. For half a second, we both froze, the door half open between us like a negotiation. Then the person shoved. The glass slid an inch, then two. My feet skidded on the tile. My shins screamed where I'd hit the chair earlier. The lantern swung wild in my left hand and threw the intruder's shadow up onto the ceiling, huge, distorted, ridiculous. "Get back," I yelled, and my voice cracked. From the front of the house, the door slammed once hard like someone had hit it with their shoulder. Dad shouted something I couldn't make out. I jammed my foot into the bottom track, toe wedged between the moving door and the frame. Pain shot up my ankle, but the door stopped. The person outside cursed, low and fast. "Evan," Dad's voice, closer now, coming down the hall. "What's happening?" "Back door," I shouted. "Someone S." The hoodie figure leaned in and shoved again, harder. The edge of the door bit into my shoe. I could feel the rubber sole compressing, my toe going numb. If they got the door open, they were in the kitchen in 3 steps. Past the laundry nook, past the pantry, past my mom. My mom. I twisted the latch up with my right hand, trying to force it into place, but the door wasn't closed enough. My fingers slipped. The lantern banged against the counter and clattered to the floor, rolling. The light spun in frantic circles, making the room strobe. The figure took advantage of the chaos. Their hand shot through the gap and grabbed the inside handle. I reacted without thinking. I slammed my forearm down on their wrist, bone on bone. A dull thud. They jerked back with a sharp inhale. My elbow screamed from where I'd hit the doorframe earlier. The pain made my eyes water instantly. "Evan," Dad burst into the kitchen, holding a heavy metal flashlight like a baton. He looked past me, saw the hand, saw the gap, and his face changed, pure focus. All the spreadsheet softness gone. He stepped in beside me and shoved the door with his shoulder, driving it toward the frame. For a moment, it worked. The gap narrowed. The intruder's fingers slipped away. Then the figure outside kicked the bottom edge of the door one solid boot strike, and my wedged foot took it. My ankle rolled. White-hot pain. I went down on one knee, gagging on a sound. Dad swore and grabbed my arm, hauling me back as the door slid open a full foot. The intruder didn't step in right away. They held the door open and looked over their shoulder into the yard like they were waiting for a cue. From the living room, there was a crash, a splintering thud that made the whole house vibrate. The front door. Dad's eyes went wide. "Laura," he shouted. I pushed myself upright on my good leg, shaking. "Mom," I yelled, and it came out too loud, too desperate, like I was 10 again and lost in a store. No answer. The intruder at the sliding door finally moved. They didn't sprint in heroically. They moved like someone who'd done this before, quick, controlled, trying not to slip on tile. Hoodie up, gloves. Their heads stayed down. Dad swung the flashlight, aiming for the intruder's shoulder, but the figure ducked and barreled forward. Dad's swing clipped the hoodie's back instead of bone. The intruder slammed into Dad's chest. Dad grunted and stumbled backward into the pantry door. The flashlight hit the floor and skittered, its beam slicing the cabinets. I grabbed the nearest thing with weight, the cast iron skillet cooling on the stove from earlier. My hands trembled around the handle. The skillet felt absurdly heavy, like I'd picked up a dumbbell with panic on it. The intruder turned toward me. I saw their eyes for the first time, just eyes above a mask. Not glowing, not evil, human eyes, alert and annoyed. "Don't," they said, and it wasn't a threat so much as a command they expected to work. I swung anyway. I didn't hit their head. I wasn't that lucky, and I wasn't that skilled. The skillet caught their forearm as they raised it to block. The impact jolted up my wrist and into my teeth. The intruder made a short, involuntary noise and staggered sideways. Dad recovered, grabbed a chair from the table, and shoved it into the intruder's path. The chair legs scraped and caught. The figure stumbled over it and slammed into the counter, knocking over the knife block. Knives clattered across tile like dropped keys. My mom appeared at the kitchen entrance, not running, not screaming, walking. Her hair clip was gone. Her scrubs were smudged with something dark on the elbow, maybe garlic bread crumbs, maybe dirt. I couldn't tell in the spinning lantern light. She held her phone in both hands like it was a badge. Her face was blank, and she said clearly, flatly, "Please place your items in the bagging area." Dad stared at her, horror and confusion colliding. "Laura, what the hell?" The intruder's eyes flicked to her, then back to us. They didn't look surprised. They looked impatient, like our family drama was delaying the schedule. From the front of the house, a voice shouted, "Back door." Now, a second person, coordinated. The intruder in the kitchen made a decision. They lunged for the kitchen counter where my mom's purse usually sat. It wasn't there. Their hands swept, searching, then grabbed my mom's phone out of her hands. My mom didn't react like someone being robbed. She just stood there and repeated, "Would you like to sign up for our rewards program today?" Dad moved toward her, reaching out like he could shake her back to normal. But the intruder shoved him with one arm and sprinted toward the hallway, the same hallway my mom had been staring at all night. They knew the layout. They ran straight for my room. I knew instantly what this was about. Not us, not the TV, not jewelry, my laptop, my dad's laptop, our phones, my dad's work access, 2-factor codes, banking apps, password managers, the texts, the utility worker, the dropped calls. This wasn't supernatural. It was procedural. It was a play. And my mom had been compromised before the power even went out. "Dad," I shouted. "Hallway, stop him." Dad spun and chased, limping slightly from where he'd hit the pantry door. I followed on my bad ankle, half-hopping, pain making my vision pulse. The lantern rolled after us, casting manic circles as if the house itself was dizzy. We hit the hallway. The intruder was already at my door, yanking it open wider. My coat chair shifted again, making that stupid silhouette, but nobody had time to mistake it now. Dad caught up and grabbed the intruder's hoodie from behind, jerking them back. The hoodie stretched. The intruder twisted and drove an elbow into Dad's ribs. Dad made a sound, I'd never heard from him, air knocked out, a raw grunt, and he folded slightly, one hand going to his side. The intruder dove into my room anyway and snatched my backpack off the floor. My backpack with my wallet and keys, and worse, my small notebook with every login I'd ever written down in a moment of laziness. They ripped it open, fingers moving fast, too practiced. I raised the skillet again, but my wrist screamed. My grip slipped. The intruder pulled out my notebook, flipped it once, and I saw the recognition in their eyes. A quick nod to themselves. Then they bolted. Dad grabbed for them and missed. He stumbled, wheezing, clutching his ribs. I went after the intruder on sheer adrenaline. I got 2 steps into the hallway before my ankle gave out. My foot slid. I crashed hard onto the tile, shoulder first. Pain exploded through me. My breath punched out. For a second, I couldn't inhale at all. Just a helpless, silent gape. The intruder vaulted over my legs like I was furniture and sprinted toward the back. Dad, gasping, forced himself upright and lunged after them anyway. He reached the kitchen just as the intruder shoved the sliding door fully open and slipped out into the yard. Dad swung the metal flashlight. He must have grabbed it again, and this time it connected with the intruder's shoulder blade. A solid hit. The intruder stumbled, almost fell, then caught themselves on the patio railing and kept going, limping. A second later, someone whistled short, sharp, and a car engine turned over in the street beyond the fence. Tires on wet pavement, quick and controlled. Dad stood at the threshold, breathing hard, looking like he wanted to chase, and knew he couldn't. He slid the door shut with shaking hands and locked it. Then he turned and sank to the floor against the cabinet, pressing his palm to his ribs, face pale. I lay in the hallway, trying to pull air back into my lungs like it had been stolen. My shoulder throbbed. My ankle felt wrong, swollen already, unstable. The lantern's light pooled near my head, warm and cruelly calm. My mom stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding her empty hands in front of her, as if the phone was still there. Her eyes moved slowly, not tracking anything specific. "Help is on the way," she said. Dad looked at her, tears in his eyes. He didn't blink away. "Laura," he whispered. "Laura, please." She blinked once, long, heavy. For a moment, I thought she was coming back. Then her gaze slid past us, toward the front of the house. "Next customer," she said quietly. And outside, somewhere on our dark street, a car door shut. The power came back at 9:17 p.m. Not with drama, not with a bang. Just a soft click somewhere in the walls, the refrigerator humming awake, the porch light blinking on like it had only been resting its eyes. By then, the house was full of other noises. The paramedic's boots squeaked on tile as he knelt beside me in the hallway, careful with my ankle. The EMT asked my name twice and waited for me to answer both times. He smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Someone, probably a neighbor, was murmuring in the living room, their voice low and concerned. Like this was a story they'd already started telling themselves. My dad sat on a kitchen chair with his shirt pulled up, ice pressed awkwardly against his ribs. He kept apologizing to the paramedic for bleeding on the towel, even though there wasn't much blood. His voice shook more when he tried to joke. "I'm fine," he said for the 4th time. "I've had worse from a bad chair at work." The paramedic nodded in the patient way people do when they know you're lying to yourself. "Still getting you checked," he said. The police arrived next. 2 officers, one young, one older. They took notes. They asked the same questions in different ways. What time did the outage start? Did we recognize the intruders? Did anything go missing? I said yes. I said no. I said I wasn't sure. They found my backpack in the yard, half unzipped, dumped near the fence. My wallet was still there. My keys. The notebook was gone. The older officer's pen paused when I told him that. What kind of notebook? Passwords, I said, embarrassed even now. Stuff I was supposed to memorize and didn't. He didn't judge me. He just nodded and wrote it down. They said the intruders likely hit multiple houses during the outage. Opportunistic but organized. The texts. The fake utility angle. Not uncommon. They told us we did the right thing by not opening the door. They told us we were lucky. Lucky is a strange word to hear when your ankle is swelling like a bad thought, and your father winces every time he breathes too deeply. My mom sat on the couch the entire time. She didn't cry. She didn't pace. She didn't argue with anyone. She held a blanket around her shoulders, even though the heat had come back, and stared at the coffee table like she was waiting for it to prompt her. When the younger officer asked her if she was injured, she said, "Thank you for shopping with us today." Everyone froze. The officer blinked, then glanced at my dad. Dad swallowed and said, "She's had a rough day." They didn't push, not then. They finished their report. They gave us a case number. They told us someone would follow up. When the house finally emptied out, neighbors drifting home, police cars pulling away, the ambulance leaving me with a temporary brace, and a warning not to be a hero, the quiet felt heavier than the blackout had. The lights were on, but nobody turned on the TV. Dad locked every door twice. Front, back, garage. He tested each one, tugging like he didn't trust the locks to remember what they were supposed to do. Then he sat down across from my mom and took her hands. "Laura," he said softly, "we need to talk." She looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were wet now, unfocused but present. "I think I broke," she said. The words were so plain they hurt more than panic would have. Dad squeezed her hands. "You didn't break." She shook her head. "I let them in," she whispered. "Not the house, the phone. I answered a call earlier. They knew my name. They knew the pharmacy schedule. They told me there was fraud on our account, and I had to stay on the line. They told me not to hang up. They told me to follow instructions." Her voice went thin. I thought I was helping. The pieces slid together quietly. No monster, no possession, just pressure, authority. Scripts designed to override doubt. A tired woman after a long shift doing what she'd been trained to do for decades, comply. "They had me repeat things," she said, "to confirm, to stay calm. I don't remember when it stopped being a conversation." Dad leaned his forehead against hers. "We'll fix it." "I kept thinking," she said, "if I just did it right, it would end." I thought of her standing in the kitchen, repeating lines like a function call stuck in a loop. That night, none of us slept. We sat together in the living room with all the lights on. My ankle elevated on pillows. Dad breathing shallow but steady. Mom holding her phone like it might apologize. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from a banking app I'd forgotten I even had. New login detected. I showed Dad. He nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we handle it in the morning." Morning came anyway. In daylight, the house looked ordinary again. Scuffed baseboards, coffee rings on the counter. The same magnet-covered fridge. But there were new things too. A cracked pantry door, a chair leg bent wrong, a smear on the sliding door where a hand had been. The insurance adjuster came. The locksmith came. A technician from the phone company shrugged and said outages could do weird things to networks. Maybe interference. Maybe coincidence. Mom didn't go back to work. She started therapy instead. So did Dad eventually. I moved my stuff out of the guest room and into boxes, not because anyone asked me to, but because the room felt borrowed now. Weeks passed. Accounts were frozen. Passwords changed. Credit watched. Most of the damage stopped before it spread too far. That part, at least, had an ending. But some things didn't reset cleanly. Sometimes, when my mom is tired, she still slips. Not full scripts, just fragments. Please wait, she'll say when someone asks her a question too fast. Next, when no one is in line. She always catches herself now. She laughs it off. But the laugh comes a beat late. We don't tease her about it. We don't talk about the hallway much either. Or the way the intruder knew which door was mine. Life resumes its shape. Work, bills, dinners, lights on in empty rooms. But sometimes, when my phone buzzes unexpectedly, my chest tightens. And sometimes, when my mom pauses too long before answering, I watch her face carefully, waiting to see if the person I know is still there, or if she's waiting for a prompt. The house is quieter now. Not empty, just listening.